Welcome to J is for Justice podcast. If live breaking news and following true crime is your thing, then please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like what you see in my videos, please consider giving them a thumbs up. Hey everyone, welcome back to J is for Justice. My name is Jay. I am your host. Welcome to my channel for this very serious live today. I don't expect to have a ginormous crowd because this isn't about drama or anything else. This actually is not getting enough coverage in my opinion, but hopefully it will. Hopefully it will as this transgresses in the court system. Thank you, Kels and Melissa B, and Olive Juice, Olive Jammers. Kendo is listening while working. Listen while you work. Hello, Miss Sherry. Good to see you today. Lori, Green-Eyed PI. Good to see you guys. Butter. Thanks for joining today. This is a pretty important live to me. This is really important. Let's see here. I'm going to play a couple videos for you guys. I'm going to give you a little J is for Justice history lesson before we begin. Because I don't know everything that there is to know about Malcolm X. And I'm here to admit this is a learning experience for me as much as it may be for you. So this is coming from a different approach. I don't know everything on this. I don't know everything on anything, but this is something that is true to my heart right now because not only am I about, exposing these so-called conspiracies, the gaslighting that has occurred over the years with all of these conspiracies, starting with JFK, not starting with JFK, but, just all of these things that are coming out in the open, if you will. Malcolm X was one of the most powerful voices of the civil rights era, known for his sharp intellect, fiery speeches, and unwavering demand for justice and equality. He championed Black empowerment and self-determination, challenging the systemic racism ingrained in American society by our government, I will say. Unlike other civil rights leaders of his time, Malcolm X often rejected the notion of nonviolence, advocating instead for the right to self-defense and encouraging Black Americans to take pride in their heritage and fight for their freedom, quote, by any means necessary. His unapologetic stance, which is what I love, made him a polarizing figure, yet an undeniable force for change. In the final years of his life, Malcolm X's vision began to evolve. He moved beyond domestic racial issues to advocate for global human rights, emphasizing solidarity across racial and national lines. Tragically, his life was cut short on February 25th, 1965, when he was assassinated in New York City. His death has remained the subject of controversy and speculation for decades, with new investigations and lawsuits continuing to shed light on the circumstances surrounding his assassination. These efforts aim to uncover the full truth and hold those responsible to account. So with that being said, I'm going to play a short clip of one of his speeches from the lost tapes of Malcolm X. This is from April 27th, 1962.
In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in hate. We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you? And I, for one, as a Muslim, believe that the white man is intelligent enough. If he were made to realize how black people really feel and how fed up we are without that old compromise and sweet talk. Stop sweet talking him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
Okay, so with that being said, I was raised, and you guys can let me know if you were also raised this way, in white America, Romeo, Michigan, population 3,000. I was raised that this man was nothing but a nuisance. And it was never said outright. It was never said outright. It was just the unsaid message that I received. Put a 1 in chat if you feel you received this same message going through the public school system in America. Put a 1 if you were raised with the belief or the thought or the notion that this man was a nuisance to society. I'm curious. Because I'm not afraid to admit that I was raised to believe certain things that are not fucking true. And that's all part of growing. Look at the ones. Mallory, green-eyed, Lori, Sherry, Shay, Rocky, all of us. We're all in the same little white boat. September, Vivian. 1 by default, but I've always questioned authority, so I read up. Right. If you didn't do your own research, what was the vibe you walked away, with if you heard the name Malcolm X or you saw a black person wearing a Malcolm X t-shirt? What was your upbringing telling you how to react to something like that? I was raised that he preached extremism, but that was before I found out so many lies have been taught. Good for you, Butter. Kendi and Kels didn't learn that way. And I wonder if it's an age thing, like a generational thing. You're going to say too, Jammers. I wasn't raised to hate him, but I don't feel, and it didn't come from my parents. My parents never said anything about it. I don't know where it came from. And I'm soul searching myself via these deep dives. I would be doing this if I wasn't sitting here right now. So the fact that there's 50 of you with me that actually give a shit and see a bigger picture, I applaud you. I applaud you for being here. Thank you. I never saw color, but everyone around me did. Yeah, I've learned a lot becoming an adult and doing my own research and stuff, but it's amazing to me the things that are taught in school or not taught in school, should I say. Evelyn, it's funny. I was never raised with any opinions regarding race. No discussions until the Detroit riots. Evelyn, I worked with a woman who was a little kid through the Detroit riots, and she lived in Detroit, and hearing her stories, I had never even heard of that. Do you know that I didn't learn? I was born in 1973. Hey, Cricket. And I never learned about the Detroit riots. I didn't even know they happened until I was an adult. That blows my mind. What's up, Creole? Hey, Kansas. Welcome in, everybody. The educational system is intended to indoctrinate and divide. And divide. That is such a good point, Mallory. If that racial division didn't exist all of these years, do you know how powerful the human race would be to the general government of the United States? Do you know how powerful of a force the citizens could be if they band together on certain issues? And they don't want that. They've never wanted it. And if you go back to I think it's called redlining. Put a 1 in chat if you know what redlining is. It was back in the day in the 50s when they first started doing home mortgages. And the lenders didn't loan to the people within the red lines. This is how we became the inner cities. So they redlined all of the areas where the black folks were most populated. Those became our inner cities. They separated them from the rest of the people who could get mortgages to buy homes. That was one major thing that totally just took the equality out of it. It's written in deeds still today, says Betty. Isn't that nuts? But if you're ever curious, look up a red line map of the United States back then. It's deploring. It's deplorable. It's deplorable. And the lengths that they went to keep those racial divides, I mean, is death. Is literally death. So I want you to hear this one more clip. Then we're going to get into the lawsuit against the CIA, the FBI, and the New York Police Department, because 2 people went to prison for murdering him, and then they were exonerated as well. So here we go. Look at this clip.
Apparently, 2 men approached the speaker's rostrum and discharged shots at him from apparently very close range.
As I turned around quickly, and the next thing I saw was Malcolm falling back in a dead faint.
My mother threw herself over her babies, and she yelled out, "They're killing my husband."
I heard shots, and I saw people crawling on the floor. And so I got down too. Then when I was looking out, and
this is his wife, his pregnant wife, by the way. She was pregnant with twins on the day that her husband was murdered in front of her face. She tried to give him CPR after they shot him.
Saw someone look in amazement to the front. I knew they had shot my husband.
He sustained 1 shot in the lower right chin, and the other 6 hit him in the chest and body.
I looked out at him and I said, he's going to die. I kept saying to myself, he's going to die, he's going to die.
How many immediately? No, he wasn't dead immediately, but expired very shortly thereafter.
Apparently, 2 men approached the speaker's rostrum and discharged shots.
Okay, here is some footage from the day he was shot as well. You're going to hear from an eyewitness. Hey, Flobo, Santa Flo. This is in New York City. Oh, you're welcome for talking about this. I'm glad to. I'm glad to. Thank you, Kels, for gifting a membership. Welcome, Kansas Gal. Make sure you thank Kels for that. So grateful for you. Here we
I
go.
was sitting in the front row, right in front of Malcolm, in fact, and he came out on the stage. The introductory speaker turned over the platform to him, and he raised his hand in a Muslim greeting, Salam Alaikum. At that point, I heard a rumbling behind me, and I'm sure everyone else did too, and I turned around in my seat to see what it was. And then we saw, I saw two guys standing up, and the next thing, my next impression, it all happened very rapidly, as you can understand, is of a gunshot. And I saw Malcolm had his hand up. He said, stay cool, stay calm, or something like that. And just then the gunfire went off, and his hand was up. I remember this. I turned around quickly, and the next thing I saw was Malcolm falling back in a dead faint. Right after that, of course, like everybody else, chairs were being knocked over. There were screams. Everybody was in a mad confusion. I dove for the floor and scrambled behind a rampart on the side. My first impression was, of course, as a reporter, to get to a telephone and file my story. And I started crawling towards the back of the auditorium. And I incidentally saw a guy running out, evidently one of the perpetrators running out, and he was shooting like a cowboy all over the place. And, of course, the shots were going off wildly. And after that, there was pandemonium in the place.
Hey, Potato. Let me make sure I showed you guys all the clips I had set aside here. This is just crazy. But now it's being exposed that the FBI, CIA, and NYPD conspired together to kill Malcolm X. And these two guys were convicted and then cleared. Here's one more clip, then we're getting into the lawsuit. I've got all 85 pages or whatever it is.
Yeah, Bill.
Here we go.
And I'm Bill Ritter. We begin with those new developments in the decades-old notorious murder of civil rights icon Malcolm X in Washington Heights nearly 57 years ago.
Two of the three men convicted in his assassination to be cleared of all charges after a nearly 2-year-long investigation that found the FBI and NYPD withheld key evidence that could have led to their acquittal.
The real killer? Well, we may never know, but New York...
You hear that? Yeah, Fred Hampton, they just got done litigating Fred Hampton. I know, September. I'm so grateful for these time capsule videos. This was 3 years ago. FBI, CIA, NYPD withheld key evidence in his assassination.
New York leaders now say they're ready to admit they failed justice in this case.
Eyewitness evidence that could have found the FBI and NYPD withheld key evidence that could have led to their acquittal.
The real killer? Well, we may never know, but New York leaders now say they're ready to admit they failed justice in this case.
Eyewitness News reporter Anthony Johnson following the big new developments. He's live in Washington Heights. Anthony?
Yeah, Bill and Sade, I'm standing at 165th and St. Nicholas Avenue, directly across the street, the former home of the Audubon Ballroom. That's where Malcolm X was assassinated back in 1965. And as you say, now authorities are saying that two of the men found guilty in that crime are actually innocent.
If democracy means justice, why don't we have justice?
Their names are being cleared after more than 5 decades.
Yeah, they're two black
Muhammad
men.
Aziz, who's on the left, is now 83 years old, and Khalil Islam, who is deceased, were both convicted for the February 21st, 1965 murder of civil rights leader Malcolm X. It appears both the FBI and...
What the hell? I'm watching this for the first time with y'all, just so you know. If I rewind every now and then, If I rewind every now and then, it's because I haven't seen this. Creole, we got to stick together and do better. Absolutely.
Murder of civil rights leader Malcolm X. It appears both the FBI and NYPD had information that would have exonerated both during trial, but it was never passed to the prosecution or defense. The attorney representing the family of Malcolm X welcomes the news. Both men will be cleared.
It's very important to find out the truth about who killed Malcolm X, but it is absolutely important that people who were wrongfully convicted of killing Malcolm X are completely exonerated.
Islam, who was known as Thomas X. Johnson, and Aziz, also known as Norman Butler, spent years behind bars after being found guilty. Aziz was finally released in 1985 and Islam in 1987. But their lives and families were destroyed. This announcement touches on a justice system that many say is biased.
And hopefully that will set a precedent for other black men who have been wrongfully convicted in America.
After getting word about his name being cleared, Muhammad Aziz issued a statement saying, "The events that led to my exoneration should never have occurred. Those events were and are the results of a process that was corrupt to its core, one that is all too familiar even in 2021.
Wow.
On the 20th anniversary of the assassination, our Gil Noble documented the life and death of Malcolm X. Gil Noble knew Malcolm X personally from his days here in Harlem.
It was 20 years ago to this day that Malcolm X was assassinated right here in this ballroom in front of 400 people.
The exoneration came after Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance reopened the case following a 2020 Netflix documentary called Who Killed Malcolm X?
We need to watch that in Discord. This stemmed from a documentary, guys. How many times have we seen this happen? A documentary bringing things to light, changing the way history went down. That is amazing. We need to definitely watch that.
And work done by the Innocence Project.
It's been out there for a long time in plain sight. Everybody knew these two men were innocent, and their families suffered so much from this. It's just a shame that it didn't happen earlier, but...
And 83-year-old Muhammad Aziz is expected to be in Manhattan criminal court tomorrow afternoon
83.
when this case against him will be dismissed.
83 years old. Can you even imagine? Total patsies. And you know why? Because they were black. Because they were black. Which brings me to the highlight of today's live stream. And I want to thank you guys again for being here. Learning about this stuff is so important to me. And I'm glad that it's important to you too. It is insane. But it's never too late to learn. So this is a 85-page document. There was a press conference that the family did. I don't know. It's 30 minutes long. I don't really want to play all of that. You know what? Maybe I should show you guys a couple clips. I want you to see his daughter before we start. Because the daughter is one of the main, or one of his daughters. I know one passed away not too long ago. They say it wasn't suspicious. She was found in, mailman. She was found in her apartment, deceased. But they say it wasn't suspicious. So I don't know any more about that. But I do want to show you a part of this because...
civil rights attorney.
We are peaceful people. We are peaceful people.
Hold on.
We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us.
This week marks 56 years since civil rights activist Malcolm X was assassinated right here in New York City. For decades, there have been many questions around the circumstances of his death and whether the three men convicted of his murder were...
Look at this. 3 years ago, deathbed letter from former officer alleges NYPD FBI link to Malcolm X assassination. So someone was on their damn deathbed and felt guilty and decided to say, oh, the FBI's behind this.
This is civil rights attorney Ben Crump talking about the announcement of a new. This is civil rights attorney Ben Crump.
So Ben Crump is who I got. Oh my God, the Chia Pet comment threw me off, Fem. But this is who I got the document from, is their attorney. So Malcolm X is, one of his daughters is right there to the right. She's absolutely stunning. What we have, I want to show you guys the pictures. I want you to hear from, we even have white men on their team, which I loved seeing. But I want you to hear about these photos that they have out here.
Questions. I want to acknowledge some great lawyers on our team who are not present here but deserve. Drewby, been so patient.
That's fought primarily for our mother, who was here to. So it has taken us a long time to get to this point, and we fought primarily for our mother, who was here on February 21st, 1965, when just a week prior her home was firebombed, as she and her husband lay in bed as husband and wife with.
So a week before Malcolm X was assassinated, their home was firebombed, and they had a bunch of kids, and she was pregnant.
The bomb thrown into the nursery where my sisters and I, age 6, 4, 2,
you hear
and
this,
not
evilness?
quite 1, slept. My mother was pregnant when she came here to see her husband speak, someone who she just admired totally. And
y'all,
to witness.
This infuriates me. Infuriates me. Put a 1 in chat if this infuriates you.
This
hear that again.
Not thrown into in bed as husband and wife, with the bomb thrown into the nursery where my sisters and I, age 6, 4, 2, and not quite 1, slept. My mother was pregnant when she came here to see her husband speak, someone who she just admired totally. And to witness this horrific assassination of her husband. It's this photo over here where we see my mother, who was a registered nurse, care for her husband, loosen his tie, give him the comfort that he needed. She attempted to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She turned this place, which represented trauma, tragedy, and turned it into a place of triumph, not for herself, but for others, to be the beneficiaries of my father's work, this young generation to carry this work forward so we can get a semblance of truth and justice for all of those who have been wrongfully murdered. And so I'm grateful on behalf of my sisters, my 5 sisters, to stand here with a competent, ethical group of experts, legal experts, as we seek justice for the assassination of our father, and that the truth will be recorded in history.
Yes.
Thank you.
At the very least, they deserve the truth being recorded for history. Now take a look. I believe they pan in on these. Oh, listen to this part. Listen to this part. This is when he takes
copies as soon as you send the email request and such.
Which
Any
I
other
did.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Are you asserting that the 9 undercover officers who you referenced earlier who were in the room that day, were they all NYPD?
We believe many of them were NYPD, but as we said, we're still waiting to get files. We have certain files. We have some of the things that J. Edgar Hoover said in regards to Malcolm X.
We're going back to J. Edgar Hoover days.
Who he considered one of the greatest threats to America.
Which he was.
Who he said we must do something about Malcolm X. And
sorry, I had that. J. Edgar Hoover was a threat to the United States, in my opinion, more so than Malcolm X was ever a threat. What's up, John Gone Girl? Praying for justice and the truth. It needs to be corrected in the record.
we know that he gave the order, and the Bihar Attorney Shear, you all correct me if I misspeak, but he gave the order after Malcolm X was assassinated that nobody is to reveal the presence of our undercover officers in this room.
J. Edgar Hoover said after the assassination, no one is to reveal they had undercover FBI officers in that room, or NYPD officers.
Those men went to prison wrongfully, and all those undercover agents knew that they were not involved in the assassination of Malcolm X. That's the very meaning of fraudulent concealment. They were committing a fraud by concealing the truth, and that is one of the bases for our lawsuit. And we have bought 42-1983 excessive force claim. We bought 42 USC 1983 claim that the state created a danger and failure to protect. A 42
It's evil as
1983
hell.
claim denial.
All right, we're going to read all of this, but I just wanted you guys to get a gist. This is, I want you to hear her too.
Significant time.
She speaks very
as
well.
We fight to right the historic wrongs of our justice system and our country's governance.
She's another lawyer on the team.
Our legal teams are honored to work with these inspirational daughters. Ms. Shabazz, thank you for allowing us to work with you to fight for your father. I want to take a moment to make sure everyone knows who Malcolm X was. Yes, he was a father, a husband, a community member, but he was also a man who genuinely fought for us and had a vision of what we could be. He shared his visions with us in speeches given in June of 1964 about how the problem of the black man needed to be taken away from the hands of the United States government and instead put before the United Nations, where he believed that this world body would be able to have the power to hold the United States accountable for the illegal and criminal injustices that they committed against their people. In January 1965, Malcolm said in an interview with the CBC, "We believe that our problem is not a violation of civil rights, but of human rights."
Yes.
Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we are denied the right to be a human being. Couldn't Malcolm have said these same words today? Haven't we seen the same forms of repression happen today?
Yep.
This is the legacy that we fight for the future Malcolm knew America could have. Federal and state agencies targeted Malcolm and described him as a black extremist, labeled black organizations as hate groups, and developed a systemic and illegal war on the black movement. Malcolm knew that these efforts to repress his justice movement existed, yet he remained steadfast, uncompromising and unwavering in his beliefs, and unapologetically proud to be black. This terrified the United States so greatly that the FBI New York special agent sent a letter to J. Edgar Hoover on December of 1964. He called for extra coverage and extra surveillance of Malcolm X's activities, since Malcolm intended to have the issue of the oppression of black Americans brought before the United Nations. Just 2.5 months later, Malcolm was assassinated. In Malcolm's memory, we honor his legacy by remaining steadfast in our fight for justice for every single just cause, including his.
All right, I thought it was important you guys hear that as well. It's a lot going on. Okay, let's get over to the lawsuit now. I haven't looked at this. I've been waiting, and was really excited to read it. So let's get right into it. In the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, and I'm sure I'm going to hack her name, but I'll try. Elisa Shabazz, the administrator of the estate of Malik El Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, and their individual capacities, Elisa Shabazz, Gamila Lumbumba Shabazz, and Malik Shabazz, the plaintiffs. Those are all his kids. Y'all, look at the plaintiffs. Look at the plaintiffs. The United States of America, the estate of Clyde Anderson Tolson. That was J. Edgar Hoover's boyfriend. J. Edgar Hoover hated gay people because he was a gay person. He hated himself. Clyde was his boyfriend in the closet. On behalf of J. Edgar Hoover and the estate of William C. Sullivan, the estate of George C. Moore, the estate of Richard McGarrah Helms, Arthur Fulton, Dale Sutton, August Masique. I just believe that all these names need to be said. Stephen Edwards, John Alley Simmons, Ronald Timberlake, Abdul Basit Naim, the City of New York, Vincent Lyons Broderick, the estate of Howard R. Leary, the estate of Ferdinand Cavallaro, Francis Salento, William Confrey, John J. Conroy, Thomas T. Cosmano, Winston W. DeVergy, Sanford Garelick, Joseph Iacovelli, John Keeley, Thomas Rennigan, Francis J.M. Robb, James Russian, Howard G. Schatzel, Francis M. Sullivan, Warren Taylor, the estate of Patrick J. Twomey, Ernest Vose, Michael Willis, the estate of Anthony Tony Bouza, the estate of Jerry Fulcher, William Bill Knapp, the estate of Bernard Barney F. Mulligan, the estate of Eugene Jean Roberts, Henry Suarez, the estate of Theodore Ted Theologes, the estate of Raymond A. Wood, the estate of Anthony Tony Usowitz, and Does 1 through 50 inclusive. They all need to be said. Now, here is the table of contents. We're going to go through this. If we have to go into a part 2, we go into a part 2. Just the way it is. The estate of Malik El Shabazz, a.k.a. Malcolm X, by its administrator, and then it lists the kids, by and through their attorneys, Ben Crump Law, PLLC, the law firm of Hunt, Hamlin, and Ridley, the People's Law Office, and Beldock, Levine, and Hoffman, LLP, for their complaint against the above-named defendants allege as follows. Malcolm X was murdered on February 25th, 1965. He was one of the greatest black libertarian leaders and public intellectuals of his generation. Malcolm X was a respected minister, teacher, human rights activist, and the founding member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity and Muslim Mosque, Inc. He fought against racism, colonialism, and oppression, and advocated for black people to engage in self-determination. 2. This case is about the corrupt, unlawful, and unconstitutional relationship between law enforcement, including the defendants herein, and ruthless killers that went unchecked for many years and was actively concealed, condoned, protected, and facilitated by governmental agents, including, but not limited to, the defendants and their agencies, ultimately leading to the orchestrated murder of Malcolm X. 3. As a direct result of the defendants' intentional, bad faith, willful, wanton, reckless, unreasonable, and or deliberately indifferent acts and omissions, Malcolm X was deprived of his federal constitutional rights, was robbed of his life and freedom, and sustained severe physical, emotional, and monetary damages, including conscious physical pain and suffering. As a further direct result of the defendant's intentional bad faith, the Shabazz family was robbed of their husband and father and deprived of his companionship and his financial, spiritual, emotional, and moral guidance and support, and sustained severe mental anguish and pecuniary losses caused by the death of their husband and father. 4. As a part of the fraudulent concealment and cover-up, the FBI and NYPD defendants arrested several individuals who they alleged were involved in the assassination. And these false arrests resulted in the malicious prosecution and wrongful conviction of 2 innocent individuals. This misconduct caused the incarceration and vilification of these 2 innocent men and the suppression of the governmental role in the assassination of Malcolm X. Yeah, J. Edgar is evil. Evil, or was. 6, and you know what? It's a shame, and I've said that for a couple years now since my eyes started getting open to this, that we need to change the name of that FBI building. They did not know who murdered Malcolm X, why he was murdered, the level of NYPD, FBI, and CIA orchestration, the identity of the governmental agents who conspired to ensure his demise, or who fraudulently covered up their role. Plaintiffs and Shabazz family have lived their lives without a father and grandfather, along with a cloud of suspicion surrounding his death. The damage caused to the Shabazz family is unimaginable, immense, and irreparable. This claim is being advanced now because a reinvestigation coordinated by the efforts of the Shaney's Law Office, the Innocence Project, and the New York County District Attorney's Office Conviction Integrity Program recently uncovered the government's repeated failures, acts, and encouragement of the killers. As a result, in November of 2021, New York County District Attorney Cyrus R. Vance took the unprecedented step of apologizing for, quote, serious, unacceptable violations of law and public trust, end quote, and revealed a number of crucial NYPD and FBI documents that had been fraudulently concealed for more than 56 years. Plaintiffs come before the court advancing the following theories of liability against the defendants. First, the NYPD, in coordination with federal defendants, possessed knowledge of threats to Malcolm X's life prior to his assassination, yet failed to intervene on his behalf. It does kind of sound like Trump's assassination attempt. Deliberately not giving him protection, deliberately ignoring red flags. What the hell, man? Second, the NYPD, in coordination with federal defendants, intentionally removed their officers from inside the ballroom where Malcolm X was assassinated. Third, the NYPD, in coordination with federal defendants, caused the arrest of Malcolm X's security detail days before the assassination to leave him more vulnerable. So they arrested his security people? Fourth, the federal defendants had personnel, including undercover personnel, in the ballroom during the assassination, and they failed to protect Malcolm X from a known harm. Fifth, the federal defendants encouraged the assassination of Malcolm X. After the NYPD, in coordination with federal defendants, caused Malcolm X's death, they engaged in a decades-long effort to cover up their malfeasance. This cover-up was fraudulent and denied the plaintiff access to the courts. Plaintiffs bring this action to recover compensatory and punitive damages and award of attorney's fees and costs. So jurisdiction and venue. Let's go to notice of claim. This action is commenced 59 years after the assassination of Malcolm X because following his death, defendants knowingly and fraudulently withheld information from the plaintiffs. Defendants acted in a concerted and fraudulent manner to prevent the Shabazz plaintiffs from becoming aware of their conduct, omissions, and actions, as well as the identity of the undercover informants and the planning of Malcolm X's assassination. I know this is crazy. Hey, Batgirl. This action is timely, being brought to the continued fraudulent concealment by the Department of Justice. This is important. The Department of Justice, FBI, CIA, and NYPD, and their named and unnamed defendant agents of direct evidence that they conspired to and executed their plan to assassinate Malcolm X and then covered it up. On August 29th, 2024, Alyssa Shabazz was duly appointed as administrator of the estate of Malcolm X. On October 4th, 2024, plaintiffs filed a notice of claim against the city of New York, asserting wrongful death. On February 21st, 2023, plaintiff Alyssa Shabazz filed a notice of claim against the city of New York, seeking damages for the wrongful death of Malcolm X, her father. And then she also filed against the state and the city of New York. And then the USA, CIA, FBI, and Department of Justice. This is back in February of 2023. And this is all the sisters filed the same things. At all times relevant herein, Malcolm X was a resident of the city of Elmhurst, New York, until his assassination. Malcolm X was 39 years old and a black citizen of the United States at the time of his death. He was only 39 years old. Yeah, there was, Vet Girl, a lot of mob activity, a lot of riots. There was a lot going on. There was a very, very much division. Betty Shabazz, his wife, was pregnant with twin girls he would unfortunately never meet. Malcolm X also left behind 4 daughters, aged 1, 2, 4, and 6. The defendants, let's see. The United States of America, Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the New York City Police Department, together with their leaders, agents, and informants, were aware of and involved in the assassination of Malcolm X and knowingly failed to prevent it or to prevent Malcolm X from being assassinated. How did they keep this quiet with so many defendants? Shay, isn't it mind-blowing? It really shows the level that they can go to cover something up and keep people quiet. The following named defendants on behalf of and in furtherance of the surreptitious, illegal, and unconstitutional aims of their respective governmental agencies, together with codenamed conspirators undercover within the Nation of Islam and others as still yet unknown, acted individually, jointly, and in conspiracy to proximately cause by assassination Malcolm X's wrongful death. Now we're gonna name off some of these people with their titles. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, FBI Assistant Director William Sullivan, FBI Chief of Racial Intelligence George C. Moore. Is that even a title they hold these days? Are y'all having sound issues? FBI Chief of Racial Intelligence. That was a title. What? What's racial intelligence? So George C. Moore was the Chief of Racial Intelligence, former Deputy Director of Plans of the CIA, Richard McGarrah Helms, FBI agents, Arthur Fulton, August Masick, Dale Sutton, and Steve Edwards, FBI informant, provocateurs, John Ali Simmons and Abdul Basit Naeem, FBI informant Ronald Timberlake. Is that Justin's dad? CIA Director Richard Helms, the City of New York, NYPD past police commissioners Vincent Lyons Broderick and Howard Leary, NYPD detectives are all of these names. I'm not going to read them again. And then NYPD bossy agents. And co-conspirators William Bradley, Leon Davis, Talmadge Hayer, Benjamin Thomas, and Wilbur McKinley. Defendants acted in a concerted and fraudulent manner to prevent Malcolm X's family from being aware of their conduct. The NOI involvement and participation in the assassination resulted from urging, threats, manipulation, facilitation, and or subversive use of informant provocateurs and undercover agents by agents, supervisors, high-level officials, and leaders of the FBI and NYPD. Okay, so now they describe what a defendant is. And we're going to scroll down to 42. Defendant J. Edgar Hoover was the creator, former director, and final policymaker for the FBI until he died in 1972. At all times relevant to this action, Defendant Hoover, individually and by his agents, servants, and employees, was responsible for the operation, maintenance, and control of the FBI. Defendant Hoover oversaw the selection, training, supervision, and discipline of FBI agents from 1956 to 1972, including at the time of the 1965 assassination of Malcolm X. He participated in the assassination and or knew about it happening and did not act to prevent it. Defendant Hoover, by and through his estate, is sued in his individual capacity as a conspirator with the NYPD defendants. Do you know how much I love reading that out loud? Do you know how much disdain I have for J. Edgar Hoover? Potato and I did a few podcasts on Given the Fallout, and we went over Hoover's FBI. It's very interesting. He really was a piece of work. Defendant William Sullivan, between 1969 and 70, was the assistant director of the FBI, in charge of the Domestic Intelligence Division. And he was the primary architect of COINTELPRO, which is a counterintelligence program. At all times relevant to this action, Defendant Sullivan was responsible for the operation, maintenance, and control of COINTELPRO, the selection, training, supervision, and discipline of COINTELPRO agents from 1961 to 1971, including at the time of the assassination of Malcolm X. George C. Moore was the head of the FBI's Racial Intelligence Section, and as such, was responsible for the COINTELPRO operations directed against black leaders and organizations. He participated in the assassination of Malcolm X and or did not act to prevent it. Defendant Moore is sued in his individual capacity. Then we have the director of the CIA from 66 to 73. And you know who eventually became the director of the CIA? Was George Bush Sr. Random fun fact. Put a 1 in chat if you knew that George Bush Sr. was also director of the CIA. He participated in the assassination of Malcolm X and is being sued in his individual capacity. Too bad these guys are all dead, too. Defendant Arthur Fulton was an agent. Then they go through all these FBI agents. And then here we have the informants. Defendant John Ali Simmons, also known as John Ali and John X, was the former National Secretary for the Nation of Islam and an FBI informant provocateur. Is that what they call like Nick the Hat? Is he like an informant provocateur? You knew that? How many people in here know what COINTELPRO is? Oh, you can listen. You know what? I need to get that episode for you guys. Jammers, can you find the Given the Fallout YouTube and get that, grab that link to the one that says Hoover's FBI? Please. He participated by, yeah, okay, so they all say the same thing. Same with Abdul. Ronald Timberlake. He was an informant. Defendant John and Jane Doe's 1 through 20 are federal agents, informants, and provocateurs employed by the FBI and CIA, whose identities and actions in the assassination and cover-up have heretofore been and continue to be suppressed by themselves, by defendants Hoover, Sullivan, Moore, Fulton, Helms, Edwards, Sutton, Alley, Timberlake, Naheem, and other leaders, agents and informants. They still don't know who all these people are. All of the actions taken by the federal defendants were undertaken under federal law, as well as co-conspirators acting under state law. Then they go on to describe the defendant of New York City. The city was at all times relevant. The public employer of the individual NYPD defendants in Doe's 21 through 50 inclusive, and is legally responsible for torts these defendants committed within the scope of their employment and or under the color of the law. So we're going to kind of go through, we're just going to scroll through this because this just lists all the officers. And Bossy, I don't even know what that stands for. Oh, New York City Department, Bureau of Special Services and Investigations, Bossy. So everyone's listed individually. I wonder if any of these people like regret or are freaking out that they're, you know, I mean, look at the John Does, 1 through 50, unknown. NOI Lieutenant William Bradley and NOI members statement of facts. Here we go. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Well, I mean, the Kennedy assassination, we found out that the CIA was behind that. It's all coming to the surface. Okay, so bear with me while we read through the statement of facts. Louise Little, Mrs. Little, and her husband, Reverend Little, were active members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. The UNIA ACL was a social-friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society founded by persons desiring to the utmost work for the general uplift of Negroes, of the Negro peoples of the world. Co-founded by Marcus Garvey. Due to Mrs. and Reverend Little's involvement in the UNA ACL, the Little family was constantly threatened by white supremacist terrorist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and the Black Legion. In 1931, Reverend Little was struck and killed by an unknown vehicle. It was suspected that a white supremacist group planned and orchestrated his death because of his work with the UNIA ACL. When Malcolm X was in 8th grade, he expressed interest in becoming a lawyer, and his white teacher responded that it was, quote, no realistic goal for a nigger. Wow. Unbelievable. The Nation of Islam and Islam. Malcolm X was in prison from 46 to 52. During his incarceration, two of Malcolm X's brothers introduced him to the teaching of Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X subsequently joined the Nation of Islam. In accordance with NOI tradition of distancing oneself from family names originating from white enslavers, Malcolm X replaced his surname Little with X. Over the next several years, Malcolm X ascended the ranks of the NOI, becoming the national spokesman for its leader, Elijah Muhammad. In 1964, Malcolm X converted to Islam and left the NOI. He then adopted the name El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. The NOI should not be confounded with the mainstream Abrahamic religion of Islam. They are two different faiths. There are several critical differences between the NOI and the mainstream religion of Islam. Many are core theological principles. Malcolm X, a powerful and inspiring black leader. Malcolm X traveled nationally and internationally, advocating for the black community in the U.S. and abroad, relentlessly highlighting the mistreatment, oppression, and inequities that black people endure daily. He advocated for many issues affecting the black community that persist today, such as voter ID laws that hinder minority voters. He addressed the importance of the black vote, stating, quote, "When white people are evenly divided and black people have a block of votes on their own, it is left up to them to determine who's going to sit in the White House and who's going to be in the doghouse," end quote. Malcolm X also addressed police brutality and the over-policing of black neighborhoods, stating, quote, "Whenever something happens, 20 police cars swarm on one neighborhood. This force creates a spirit of resentment in every Negro. They think they are living in a police state and they become hostile towards the policemen," end quote. Thank you, Jam Jams. Okay. Thank you, Jam Jams. On June 28th, 1964, Malcolm X spoke at the founding rally for the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In his address to the audience, he stated, quote, "We must take the problem of the black man out of the hands of the U.S. government. And the only way we can do this is by internationalizing it and taking advantage of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Charter on Human Rights, and on that ground, bring it into the UN before a world body where we can indict Uncle Sam for the continued criminal injustices that our people experience in the government." Yes, Hoover was in office until 1973. For like 50 years, he was the director. In a visit to Cairo, Egypt in July of 64, Malcolm X delivered a memorandum to the heads of state at the Cairo conference, requesting their support, stating, quote, "The American government is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of your 22 million African American brothers and sisters. We stand defenseless at the mercy of American racists who will murder us at will for no reason other than we are black and of African descent." On January 5th, 65, Malcolm X appeared on the CBC show Front Page Challenge, where he said, "We believe that our problem is not a violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights." He planned to take the cause to the United Nations, charging the U.S. government with failure to protect its black citizens from white racism. Malcolm X was fearless, uncompromising, and unapologetically proud to be black. J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was the founder of the FBI. Many of Defendant Hoover's practices were focused on suppressing and oppressing the American people and violating their constitutional rights. The Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, was the beginning of Defendant Hoover's national attack on black activists. In October 1919, Defendant Hoover targeted activist Marcus Garvey. Defendant Hoover planted informants and undercover agents inside Garvey's organization, the UNIACL, attempting to implicate Garvey for any crimes that would prevent his work in mobilizing the black movement. Garvey would be convicted on mail fraud in 1923 after years of defendant Hoover's and the federal government's witch hunt to persecute him. Garvey was imprisoned and subsequently deported back to his homeland of Jamaica. This was the first, but certainly not the only time defendant Hoover and the FBI installed informants, provocateurs, or undercover agents inside black organizations to disrupt leaders and activism. With their actions, Hoover and the U.S. government silenced the voice of an important black leader. The FBI and COINTELPRO. I mean, this is stuff that conspiracy theorists have been waiting to come out and be exposed. Right, butter. It is pretty dumb, isn't it? It shows you the mindset of the majority of the people in our genre. To be honest with you, it's quite disappointing. It's quite disappointing. But hey, people will be how people will be. For many decades, the FBI and its leaders have viewed black activism as a potential national security threat. National security. A threat to national security. Because you're black. Can you even imagine? In 1956, defendant Hoover codified a secret nationwide and illegal FBI program known as the Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO. The smart ones are here, I know. I appreciate you guys. As described in a 1964 memo from defendant Hoover, defendant Sullivan, and other high-level FBI officials, to the personal attention of the special agents in charge of the New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. offices, this program had, quote, disrupted, exposed, and neutralized the communists. In this memo, Hoover and Sullivan described and embraced the past, present, and future of this highly illegal and unconstitutional program. Over the years, our approach to investigative programs in the intelligence field has given rise to a number of new programs, some which have been the most revolutionary, and it can be presumed that with continued aggressive approach to these problems, new and productive ideas will be coming forward. These ideas will not be increased in number or improved upon from the standpoint of accomplishments, merely through the institution of a program such as COINTELPRO, which is given another name and in fact only encompasses everything that has been done in the past or will be done in the future. As the black libertarian struggle gained momentum in the late 50s and early 60s, Hoover, Sullivan, and the FBI, with a shared racial and political animus, shifted the main focus of their illegal and unconstitutional COINTELPRO to that movement and its leaders. As described in an August 1967 memo from Hoover and his high-level assistants to all FBI field offices, the purpose of these super secret and sensitive COINTELPRO operations and techniques was to, quote, expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalist, hate-type organizations and groupings, their leadership, spokesmen, membership, and supporters, and to counter their propensity for violence and civil disorder. That was a FBI memo that went out. Not only did COINTELPRO target and surveil Malcolm X, but it also targeted other well-known black activists and groups. COINTELPRO focused on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton, Kwame Ture, a.k.a. Stokely Carmichael, Elijah Muhammad, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and many others. A March 1968 memo from defendants Hoover, Sullivan, and Moore again underscored COINTELPRO's illegal and unconstitutional focus, past, present, and future, on black activism, its leaders, and movements. Thus, Hoover, Sullivan, and their associates wrote in this memo that this continuing war on black movement was designed to, quote, prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. To, quote, prevent coalitions of militant black national groups and prevent militant black national groups and leaders from gaining respectability. So ruin them at all costs. Doesn't matter what you have to do. In this memo, Hoover identified Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, and Martin Luther King Jr. and Stokely Carmichael as targeted messiahs, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Nation of Islam among the targeted black organizations. The methods included informant-driven disinformation campaigns designed to spark conflict within the movement, discourage donors and supporters, and even break up marriages. The overt investigative activity was also used as, quote, one stated goal of the COINTELPRO program was to inspire fear among activists by convincing them that an FBI agent lurked behind every mailbox. Welcome in, Andy. Welcome to our little group today. The illegal and unconstitutional FBI methods, directed, approved, and implemented by defendants Hoover, Sullivan, and their associates, also included inter alia, I don't know what that means, burglaries, black bag jobs, setting up wrongful arrests and prosecutions, working with local police to plan and implement violent police raids, using their informants to encourage illegal activities, and falsely accusing leaders and members of the black movement of being informants. Snitch jackets. These methods and tactics also included working with and otherwise utilizing local LE, but not limited to the New York Police Department, and implementing and accomplishing their unconstitutional and illegal goals. Throughout defendant Hoover's career, he targeted some of the most pivotal black voices. It says Malcolm X assassinated, Martin Luther King assassinated, Fred Hampton, Black Panther Party leader, murdered by the Chicago Police Department in conspiracy with the FBI and COINTELPRO. They've been fighting that. I think they just wrapped that one up. Marcus Garvey was imprisoned and deported. Stokely Carmichael circulated rumor that he was a CIA informant and that the Black Panther Party was out to kill him. Black Panther apprentice Bunchy Carter was shot and killed by a member of the organization U.S. or United Slaves, orchestrated by COINTELPRO. Geronimo Pratt was falsely imprisoned for 27 years after the FBI sought to neutralize Pratt as an effective Black Panther Party functionary. In the early and mid-60s, defendants Hoover and Sullivan and their FBI associates kept evidence of their agents' illegal and unconstitutional activities in a super secret do not file file. Quote, do not file file. In 1972, after Hoover's death, his personal secretary destroyed, pursuant to his instruction, 30 to 32 file drawers of Hoover's personal files, which defendant Sullivan described as being, quote, really filled with material. They were just loaded, end quote. It was later reported that 40% of the evidence relevant to the prosecution of FBI agents had been destroyed in the New York and Washington, D.C. offices. To this date, FBI documents, including those relevant to this complaint, that have been publicly revealed rather than destroyed or suppressed, contain deletions of crucial names and conduct on information and belief There is more information that exists in government archives that would further substantiate these allegations. I'm looking to see if we have exhibitees. I'm cheating. It doesn't look like it. Okay. Bossy was variously known as the Bureau of Special Services and Investigations. And the Bureau of Special Services, its name in 1965. The Special Services Division and Special Intelligence Services, it began as the Red Squad, a unit meant to target alleged communists during the McCarthy era, before expanding its investigations to include other groups, as threatening or as enemies of the status quo. As an intelligence gathering unit, Bossy infiltrated, conducted countermeasures, and spied on individuals and political social groups. Its list of targets in the 60s included Malcolm X, the OAAU, the NOI, the Black Panther Party, and other numerous black leaders and organizations. Bossy's commander for the deep cover operation against Malcolm was defendant Tony Ulszewicz, who was later exposed during the Senate Watergate hearings as President Richard Nixon's private detective for covert dirty tricks. During the relevant period, neither the city nor the NYPD implemented adequate rules or regulations to ensure that Bossy operated within the confines of the law. Bossy had a broad and nebulous mandate, virtually no limiting operational standards, and no independent audits or other procedures in place for external review. Me too, jammers. With no guidelines or restraints imposed by the city of New York, Bossy was an instrument of abuse that freely and routinely engaged in unconstitutional and illegal tactics. Bossy agents infiltrated entire communities despite there being no evidence of criminal activity, warranting such sweeping or protracted surveillance. 2. Engaged in unlawful electronic surveillance, searches, and seizures. 3. Infiltrated organizations with informants or undercover agents who provoked and induced individuals to commit crimes. 4. Maintained and indiscriminately disseminated political dossiers or individuals and groups engaged in legal conduct. And 5. Spread false information. Bossy operated under extreme secrecy. Undercover agents were not listed as Bossy or NYPD operatives on any official roster, salary chart, or budget, and they did not appear on any official record connecting them to the NYPD. To the NYPD. Identities of fellow Bossy agents, even the agents working on the same assignment or targeting the same individual, were withheld from one another. Agents reported to different offices on different days of the week in different parts of the city. As a matter of policy, custom, and practice, Bossy and NYPD suppressed information to protect the Bossy surveillance machinery and the identities of its undercover agents. Bossy sounds really sketchy. Bossy was headquartered in a separate building, far removed from other police offices, partly to shield it from departmental, press, and public scrutiny. Additionally, it was headed by a deputy inspector who reported directly to the first deputy commissioner, bypassing typical lines of reporting within the police department. This is so corrupt and so dirty. The FBI first opened a file on Malcolm X in March 1953. Hey, Global, I don't think notifications are going out. I think I'm blackballed over here. At the same time, Bossy agents infiltrated many New York political organizations. In November 1959, the FBI office in New York sent a report to Defendant Hoover, stating that Malcolm X had become Elijah Muhammad's heir apparent. Pursuant to this revelation, FBI defendants Hoover, Sullivan, and their co-tel COINTELPRO program focused on disabling the NOI movement by neutralizing Malcolm X. On May 22nd, 1960, Assistant FBI Director Carla DeLoach approved sending an anonymous letter about Elijah Muhammad's alleged extramarital affairs to his wife and various NOI ministers. Does this not sound like some crooked stuff we've been seeing going on in the Sebastian Rogers case? I mean, really? Sending an anonymous letter saying that he's cheating on his wife to his wife and ministers. This is what we call here on the tubes, quote, go in real life. Subsequently, Malcolm X became verbal and public about his criticisms of what he considered Elijah Muhammad's moral transgressions. To fuel more divisiveness between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad on July 31st, 1962, FBI defendant William Sullivan approved another set of manipulative letters to be sent to Elijah Muhammad's followers and other individuals regarding his alleged extramarital affairs. Defendant Sullivan specified to the Chicago special agent in charge that the, quote, letters should be mailed at staggered intervals, using care to prevent any possibility of tracing the mailing back to the FBI, end quote. Then, on December 1st, 1963, Malcolm X commented on President John F. Kennedy's assassination after Elijah Muhammad specifically stated that no NOI members should make public statements regarding JFK's death. Due to the publicity and the mischaracterization of Malcolm X's statement that the assassination was the result of, quote, chickens coming home to roost, Elijah Muhammad put Malcolm X on a 90-day period of silence. Right, Andy? Yeah, they did, Micro Kimmy. Same thing to Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Hampton, and I'm sure there were others. The FBI defendants again attempted to exploit the dissension between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad when an agent visited Malcolm X's home on February 4th, 1964, 1 year before his assassination. So the FBI shows up at his house. Can you imagine this shit happening, right? This is like Uncle Taco shit. I'm just kidding. Darcy, I appreciate you being here. The FBI shows up at his house. Malcolm X secretly recorded the conversation in which the FBI agents attempted to build a rapport with Malcolm X by sympathizing with his situation. These are slithery snakes. When that was unsuccessful, the agents switched tactics, reverse Uno, and stated, quote, we talk to people every day who hate the government or hate the FBI. That is why they pay money, you know, end quote. This was an attempt to bribe Malcolm X, which was also unsuccessful. On March 8th, 1964, Malcolm X announced his departure from the NOI and his plan to create his own Black Nationalist Party. Subsequently, Elijah Muhammad ordered Malcolm X to surrender his home and car, which the NOI owned. On March 10th, 64, NOI Captain Joseph, also known as Maceo X, and a squad car arrived at Malcolm X's East Elmhurst home in Queens. Joseph served Malcolm X with eviction papers and demanded that he surrender all property belonging to the NOI. On March 30th, 1964, the FBI New York special agent in charge sent a memorandum to Defendant Hoover regarding the illegal surveillance of Malcolm X's home. On or about April 1st, 1964, Hoover recommended the illegal technical surveillance at the residence of Malcolm X Little, 2311 97th Street, Elmhurst, Queens, New York. or at any address he may move to in the future. Bossy defendant Gary Fulcher admitted decades later that he was designated to control the illegal wiretapping of Malcolm X at the OAAU headquarters in the Teresa Hotel. Defendant Fulcher illegally listened to Malcolm X and the OAAU's telephone calls, and every evening he would transport his surveillance tapes to a municipal and federal intelligence division. Wow. Shortly thereafter, on or about June 5th, 64, Defendant Hoover sent a telegram to the FBI office in New York stating, quote, "Do something about Malcolm X." On December 1st, 64, Malcolm X's friend Alex of Ghana was elected president of the United Nations General Assembly. He was vocal about his disapproval of U.S. politics. The FBI NYSAC sent a memorandum to Hoover on December 3rd, 64, stating that, quote, "Additional coverage of Malcolm X's activities is desirable, particularly since he intends to have the Negro question brought before the United Nations." Sorry, I had to take a drink. A 1969 COINTELPRO memorandum from the FBI special agent in charge to Defendant Hoover and his FBI COINTELPRO associates discussed the FBI's calculated process in sowing dissent between the NOI and Malcolm X. Over the years, considerable thought has been given and taken with the Bureau's approval, relating to methods through which the NOI could be discredited in the eyes of the general black populace, or through which factionalism among leadership could be created. Factional disputes have been developed, the most notable being Malcolm X Little. End quote. There's a lot of reading. In reply to Defendant Hoover and his FBI associates, FBI Chicago SAC wrote that at present, Chicago does not desire to rehash some of the exposés that occurred around the time of the defection of Malcolm X Little, as top-level sources could be endangered and future activities thereof curtailed. So this is saying the defendants knew Malcolm X was in imminent danger and marked for death. The FBI kept tabs on Malcolm X everywhere he went, including overseas. On his visit to Egypt in February of 64, he was poisoned. Malcolm X wrote a letter to his friend in Harlem stating, quote, "You must realize that what I'm trying to do is very dangerous because it is a direct threat to the entire international system of racist exploitation. Therefore, if I die or am killed before making it back to the States, you can rest assured that what I've already set in motion will never be stopped. Our problem has been internationalized." End quote. On March 10th, 1964, Malcolm X told Ebony magazine that the NOI leaders have, quote, "got to kill me. They can't afford to let me live. I know too much. I know where the bodies are buried. And if they press me, I'll exhume some." End quote. The day after Malcolm X stated that, quote, the NOI would even commit murder to keep this secret quiet, he received a recorded telephone message telling him that he was, quote, as good as dead. In a now declassified FBI document, the FBI NYSAC wrote, quote, "The March 21st, 1964 edition of the New York Amsterdam News contained an article on page 50 which reflected that Malcolm X claimed that officials at NOA Mosque No. 7 had tried to persuade NOI members that he was insane after his suspension in December of 63. After these NOI officials believed they had not turned enough NOI members against him, Malcolm X alleged that they sent a brother out to kill him in cold blood during February of 64. But because truth was stronger than falsehood, The brother did not believe the charge, and instead of killing Malcolm X, he told him of the plot and the actions of NOI officials. On April 3rd, 64, in Malcolm X's famous "The Ballot or the Bullet" speech, he emphasized the importance of the issue of racism becoming an international cause. On June 4th, 64, Malcolm X appeared on a Philadelphia radio program, Judge Rainey's Listening Post, on WDAS-FM, and stated that Defendant Alley, who was the National Secretary of the NOI and secretly also a high-level FBI informant, only wanted to, quote, get all the money out of the NOI that he possibly could. On June 8th, 64, the FBI surveilled Malcolm X while he was discussing an appearance on Columbia Broadcasting System television, where he would share the full story of Elijah Muhammad's extramarital affairs. An FBI memorandum documenting the surveillance states that Malcolm X told Bureau Redacted that his life is at stake because he poses a threat to the NOI, since public revelation of Elijah Muhammad's extramarital affairs would cause NOI members to desert Elijah Muhammad. That same day, Malcolm X received a recorded telephone message telling him that he was, quote, as good as dead. On or about June 12th, 1964, Malcolm X received an anonymous phone call at 1:40 p.m. stating that he would be, quote, bumped off. Later that day, Malcolm X appeared on the Jerry Williams radio program on WMEX in Boston. Williams introduced Malcolm X as the former spokesman for Elijah Muhammad and the Muslims. He mentioned that he had heard that Malcolm X had received death threats earlier that day. Malcolm X responded that he had received repeated death threats over the preceding 5 months. Malcolm X then declared to Williams that Defendant Alley, his former friend, was also on a radio program recently called The Hotline. During Defendant Alley's appearance on the show, a telephone caller inquired about the veracity of the NOI's attempts on Malcolm X's life. Defendant Alley replied, quote, they were trying to kill Malcolm X and that he should be killed, end quote. The New York Herald Tribune, dated June 16th, 64, contained an article captioned 8 guards, 32 police for Malcolm X. The article stated that police officers were providing security for Malcolm X because of the anonymous phone tips that he would be shot if he appeared in court for the eviction trial concerning the NOI house he lived in, and from which the NOI was seeking to evict him. The June 18, 1964 New York World Telegram and Sun contained an article captioned Malcolm X, man marked for death. The article stated in part that police fear Malcolm X is a marked man. The former East Coast leader of the Black Muslims goes nowhere without police shadows and his own corps of rifle-bearing bodyguards. His own adherents insist he is targeted for assassination by June 29th. At 11:37 on July 3rd, 1964, Malcolm X called the NYPD to report that, quote, 2 black Muslims were waiting at his home to harm him, but he sped off when they approached his car, end quote. Malcolm X knew the suspects' names and provided them to the police. In response, the NYPD placed an officer outside Malcolm X's home until 4 p.m. on July 4th, 1964. Despite the NYPD's response to Malcolm X's call, the NYPD and the FBI claimed it was simply a publicity stunt on behalf of Malcolm X. On July 7th, 1964, the FBI NYSAC sent another memorandum to Defendant Hoover stating that on July 5th, 1964, subject was in contact with blank, told him that orders to kill him, Malcolm X, came from Chicago. The federal defendants, at the very least, had knowledge of the threats. Thank you, Evelyn. In response, Malcolm X said he, quote, went few places without constant awareness that any number of my former brothers felt they would make heroes of themselves in the Nation of Islam if they killed me, end quote. In Chicago, NOI Captain Raymond Sharif threatened Malcolm X if he continued to talk about Elijah Muhammad. Death threats to Malcolm X's life continued throughout June and July of 64 until he left for Africa. I know this is long-winded, guys. I really do appreciate the ones that are here, though. On July 9th, 1964, Defendant Alley said in a Chicago call-in radio program, Malcolm X probably fears for his safety because he is the one who opposes the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. There were people who hated Kennedy so much that they assassinated him, white people. And there were white people who loved him so much they would have killed for him. You will find the same thing true of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I predict that anyone who opposes Elijah Muhammad puts their life in jeopardy. Bureau Redacted advised that police were sent to guard Malcolm X, who was appearing on a radio program, station WEEI at 182 Tremont Street, Boston, Massachusetts, from 2:10 p.m. to 5 p.m. and at 10 p.m. the same date. Malcolm X contacted the NYPD on July the 7th, 1964, and advised them that an attempt had been made on his life that day. Malcolm X provided notice to the defendants that he was at high risk of assassination. A couple of days before Malcolm X contacted the NYPD, the FBI was already aware of a plot on his life in Chicago. On July 10th, 1964, a CIA informant stated that Malcolm X was transporting material dealing with the ill treatment of the Negro in the United States. He intends to make such material available to the OAU in an effort to embarrass the United States. A New York Times article revealed on August 13th, 1964, the State Department and Justice Department have begun to take an interest in Malcolm X's campaign to convince African states to raise the question of persecution of American Negroes at the United Nations. After the FBI received information that the NOI had ordered the death of Malcolm X, he left on another trip to Africa. The FBI monitored and tracked his movements across the African continent. On his journey, Malcolm X continued to speak about bringing the issues of racism to an international audience. On or about December 3rd, 1964, Malcolm X was a guest in a debate hosted by Eric Abrahams, president of the Oxford Union at the University of Oxford. That evening, Tariq Ali, an internationally known political activist and writer, met with Malcolm X. After discussing various topics, he hoped they would meet again. Malcolm X responded, quote, "They're going to kill me soon, either the FBI or the Nation of Islam, or a combination of both, because I am now too dangerous for them." Despite all the government surveillance and public death threats and the actual attempts on his life, the defendants did nothing to prevent the assassination, and instead they continued to encourage it. 12 days before his assassination, Malcolm X traveled to France. Previously, he traveled and delivered speeches in France with no official resistance. However, this time, France refused to permit him into the country for no apparent reason. Shortly after his assassination, journalist Eric Norden said he had spoken with a North African diplomat about the trip to France. Norden stated that the diplomat revealed that he, quote, had been quietly informed by the French Department of Alien Documentation and Counter-Espionage that the CIA planned Malcolm's murder, and France feared he might be liquidated on its soil. The diplomat added, quote, "Your CIA is beginning to murder its own citizens now," end quote. This is direct involvement, this is direct evidence of the CIA's involvement in Malcolm X's murder. Now that's mind-blowing. That France admitted that he was quietly informed that Malcolm X had a target on his back and he didn't want it to happen in his country. That is nuts. On February 14th, 1965, around 2:45 a.m., 1 week before his assassination, allegedly unknown individuals firebombed Malcolm X's house in the middle of the night. Fortunately, his pregnant wife, Mrs. Betty Shabazz, and their 4 young daughters escaped unharmed. Malcolm X stated, "The attempt was made upon my life because I speak my mind and I know too much, and they know I will speak it." Straight up taking his constitutional right. Are y'all still with me? Put a 7 in chat if you're still with me. I feel like y'all are falling asleep on me. Come on. Wake up. I'm just kidding with you. I'm sure you guys are doing stuff and listening. The New York The City of New York defendants and the federal defendants knew and knowingly facilitated the assassination of Malcolm X. On February 16th, 1965, love seeing those sevens. Thanks, guys. Just doing a wake up check.
Wake up.
Oh, you're painting. That's so therapeutic. I love that globalism. What are you painting? On February 16th, 65, two of X's body, I'm just going to call him X, so I don't have to keep saying it, bodyguards were arrested by the NYPD for allegedly plotting to blow up the Statue of Liberty. At the encouragement and instigations of defendant bossy undercover agent Ray Wood. So they set up a couple of his bodyguards, encouraged them, hey, with an undercover agent, let's blow up the Statue of Liberty. Oh, nice, Global. These arrests were coordinated by the bossy defendants and the federal defendants to weaken Malcolm X's security, which knowingly facilitated his assassination. Doing dishes, M. Upon his return from his unsuccessful trip to France, Malcolm X called his friend and biographer, the author Alex Haley, on Tuesday, February 16th, 1965. We're narrowing in now on the assassination date. Where was I? Oh, and he says in that conversation, I have been marked for death in the next 5 days. I have the names of 5 black Muslims who have been chosen to kill me. I will announce them at the meeting. Malcolm X also told the friend that he would apply to the police department for a pistol permit. Oh, crocheting. Nice. What are you crocheting? Cunning. Good to see ya. Thanks for lurking. Laundry and listens is Rocky. I just can't wait, for some responses to this. I don't know what's going to happen, but on Friday, February 19th, 1965, Malcolm X had an appointment with Gordon Parks, a Life magazine photographer and author. Parks asked X if it was true that killers were after him. And X said, it's as true as we are standing here. They've tried it twice in the last 2 weeks. X also told Parks, I'm going to tell you something, brother. The more I keep thinking about this thing, the things that have been happening lately, I'm not all sure it's the Muslims. I know what they can do and what they can't. And they can't do some of the stuff recently going on. Now, I'm going to tell you, the more I keep thinking about what happened to me in France, I think I'm going to quit saying it's the Muslims. End quote. So he thought that the Muslims were after him, but then he started to think, this is beyond their capabilities. Before his February 21st, 1965 speech at the Audubon Ballroom, Malcolm X checked into the New York Hilton between 53rd and 54th Streets at Rockefeller Center under the alias M. Khalil. Wow, Darcy. Darcy, that is awful, but also fascinating. Good for your parents. Y'all, read Darcy's comment. She said, this really has me intrigued because my parents were some of the few in our neighborhood who sided with Malcolm X, and being white, that was a huge no-no. They had a cross burned in front of their home. Wow. It's crazy. Huh. During his stay at the hotel, unidentified individuals arrived demanding to know Malcolm X's room number. The hotel staff repeatedly refused to provide the information. For the remainder of the stay in his hotel, hotel security maintained constant security on Malcolm X's floor. Malcolm X concluded his Thursday afternoon press conference by stating, The police in this country know what is going on. This conspiracy leads to my death. On the morning of February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X awoke in his hotel room at the New York Hilton Hotel in Manhattan. Malcolm X spoke on the phone with his sister Ella and requested, quote, "Pray for me, Ella, because I firmly believe now I need it more than I ever needed it before. So you ask Allah to guide me because I feel they have me doomed for this day." In the afternoon of February 21st, 1965, X held a speaking engagement at the ballroom located at 3940 Broadway at West 165th Street in New York City. OAAU security did not search people at the door who entered the Audubon Ballroom. Audubon. This was contrary to its common practice in past events featuring Malcolm X. The NYPD affirmatively changed their practice of being visibly present inside the ballroom where he spoke. Instead, the NYPD intentionally concealed their identities from the attendees, the Shabazz family, and Malcolm X. Around 3:02 p.m., Malcolm X approached the podium on stage to address approximately 400 people. Co-conspirators coordinated a distraction in the audience by pretending to fight over a pickpocketing attempt. So Benjamin Thomas, a former assistant secretary of the NOI Mosque in Paterson, New Jersey, and Wilbur McKinley, a former member of the NOI Mosque in number 25 in Newark, New Jersey. They coordinated a distraction by pretending to fight over a pickpocketing attempt. As Malcolm X began his speech, someone yelled, quote, "Get your hands out of my pocket." Malcolm X directed his bodyguards to the audience to quell the situation. McKinley then threw a smoke bomb onto the Audubon ballroom floor to create a further diversion. Jesus. Around 3:10, co-conspirator William Bradley, also known as Al Mustafa Shabazz, a former lieutenant in the Newark NOI, shot Malcolm X in the chest with a sawed-off 12-gauge J.C. Higgins brand shotgun. Hey, Robin. Two former members of the NOI from Paterson, New Jersey, co-conspirators Talmadge Hayer, also known as Thomas Hagen, armed with a .45 caliber automatic pistol, and Leon Davis, who fired a 9mm automatic pistol, shot Malcolm X repeatedly as he lay wounded and bleed on the stage. Bullets riddled the walls behind the stage and the podium where Malcolm X was first shot. Patrolman Thomas Hoy was stationed outside the Audubon ballroom entrance. He rushed inside and saw Malcolm X lying on the stage and some people chasing a man. Patrolman Hoy, quote, grabbed the suspect. Sergeant Alvin Aronoff and Patrolman Louis Angelos happened to be cruising by in their radio car when they heard shots. When they arrived, a crowd formed with people frantically pushing and screaming that Malcolm X was shot. The two officers grabbed the arms of an individual, later identified as Thomas Hagen, and took him to the police station. Malcolm X's pregnant wife and 4 daughters huddled together in the front row, taking cover as they witnessed the horror of their husband and father gunned down just mere feet away. Supporters of Malcolm X from the crowd used a stretcher to transport him to Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center across the street. Efforts to revive Malcolm X were unsuccessful. And what we see here in this picture, it looks like all the bullet holes circled. What the? probably see it better now. This is the stage, and then this is the wall behind him where he was standing. It's awful. It's absolutely horrific. Photograph of the bullet holes in the back of the stage where Malcolm X was shot. Malcolm X was hit by 8 shotgun slugs and 9 bullets from .45 caliber and 9mm guns. The evidence indicated he was hit by the shotgun slugs while standing and by bullets from the other weapons while prone. This is the picture of him on the ground and his wife trying to render first aid. I mean, several different guns. The second picture is a photograph of where he was standing when the assassins struck. So let me zoom in on that. Can you imagine? I mean, look how small that place was. I think it was at least 3 different guns. Wow, really, Darcy? Darcy said what the media won't tell the public is when this happened, white children were walked to school by the Black Panthers in some cities for protection. Amy C., how is it we have all been in history classes and have never heard anything about his assassination? That's what I've been questioning over the past few years. I really have. So I started educating myself. Isn't it, Miss Robin? It's kind of sad that more people aren't interested in the corruption of our government. No, Amy, I asked in the very beginning of this stream what your perception was of Malcolm X growing up. And we discussed it. And the results are not very pretty. It was never a focus of anything in history, you know? I've noticed the same thing. Doctors declared Malcolm X dead at 3:30 p.m. on February 21st, 1965. He was 39 years old. A week before Malcolm X's assassination, the NYPD, despite knowing otherwise, publicly claimed that the previous attempts on X's life were publicity stunts orchestrated by himself. Quote, the guy had a bad rap sheet, end quote, as one headquarters officer put it to author Peter Goldman. Quote, you don't offer someone like that protection. Numerous associates of Malcolm X revealed in the week leading up to Malcolm X's assassination, he repeatedly complained that the NYPD would not respond to his request for protection. Moreover, X requested a firearm permit for protection that was never approved. X had previously accepted police protection. For instance, on a trip to L.A., in January of 65, the L.A. Police Department provided him with protection. And a month later, in February of 65, the Chicago Police Department protected him from the NOI for the 3 days he was in the city. Instead of ensuring Malcolm X's protection, the FBI and bossy defendants actively worked to ensure X's vulnerability by reducing his hired protection. On his deathbed in 2021, bossy defendant Wood explained in a letter that his bossy supervisors directed him to implicate 2 of Malcolm X's bodyguards in an alleged plot to blow up the Statue of Liberty. The plan was executed on February 16, 1965, and the 2 bodyguards were arrested, leaving them unavailable to protect Malcolm X on the day of his assassination. A February 22nd, 1965 memorandum from New York FBI to defendant Hoover stated, Bureau redacted overheard Bureau redacted reporter, Life magazine, in conversation with a redacted Washington, D.C., approximately 11:30 p.m., February 21, 65, during which conversation Bureau redacted stated that the killers of Malcolm X were possibly imported to New York City. Bureau redacted believed the following statements by Bureau redacted to be accurate. That Bureau redacted advised Bureau redacted to check out Washington and CIA because they wanted Malcolm out of the way because he snafu'd American relations for the U.S. The defendants affirmatively encouraged, coordinated, and provided the circumstances for the successful assassination of Malcolm X. Oh my God, look at this newspaper. That's some brutal shit, dude. Gunned down at rally. Hey, Ganja. Wop, 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 wop. It's so good to see you guys here. Feminem, glad you're still here. Vivian. We're talking about government conspiracies here that aren't so conspiratorial anymore. The NYPD and FBI defendants jointly investigated the murder of Malcolm X. Among the NYPD case detectives, the lead detectives assigned to the case were, we read all their names already. Defendants DeVerge, Taylor, Twomey, Bose, and Willis assisted with the investigation. The FBI, CIA, NYPD, and Bosse, through the FBI and Bosse defendants and their co-conspirators, infiltrated Malcolm X's organization and established a liaison system of high-ranking officers to exchange information. The FBI defendants provided the NYPD defendants with the identities of individuals believed to be present in the Audubon Ballroom at the time of the murder. NYPD defendants from Bosse also participated in certain interviews with FBI agents. Both the NYPD and FBI, at each other's request, conducted research and shared information about persons of interest, including at least 3 to 5 actual assassins. The NYPD and FBI, including, but not limited to, both the named and, as of yet unidentified, NYPD and FBI defendants worked closely together throughout the investigation and prosecution of the case, and there was extensive cooperation of sharing information. For example, it was recently revealed that at least 10 eyewitnesses, both testifying and non-testifying, were FBI informants in the Audubon Ballroom. The FBI coordinated these informants in cooperation with the NYPD. Hey, Trix. From then until now, the FBI and NYPD defendants and their co-conspirators have suppressed the identities of these FBI informants. In the NYPD case, defendant detectives were under immense pressure from their superiors and others to arrest and charge at least 2 persons with the murder of Malcolm X and to do so quickly. The lead defendant detectives employed identification procedures they knew were improper and created a substantial risk of causing a false ID. The assisting defendant detectives witnessed the foregoing, frequently failing to document the misconduct and in all cases failing to cause the disclosure of the misconduct. A Bosse lieutenant, defendant Bouza, admitted in 2011 the investigation was botched. Witnesses were manipulated by the NYPD defendants. Each of the defendant lead detectives were aware of the police misconduct. 12 eyewitnesses testified for the prosecution at the 1966 criminal trial of Thomas Hagen and Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson, the 3 men who were arrested and prosecuted for assassinating Malcolm X, that they were present in the Audubon Ballroom at the time Malcolm X was shot. They named the eyewitnesses. Neither the FBI nor the NYPD to this day revealed whether any of these witnesses, except for defendant Timberlake, were before, during, or after the assassination informants for or agents of Bossy, the NYPD, the FBI, or any other law enforcement agency. In an effort to shield the involvement of the NYPD, FBI, and Bossy defendants, witness Carrie Thomas, one of Malcolm's bodyguards, was arrested and held on $50,000 bond. They provided Thomas with the identity of the alleged perpetrators of the shooting, threatened him, promised to assist him with criminal and civil matters in return for his cooperation, provided him with money, shopping trips, and other benefits in return for his cooperation, caused him to be detained pursuant to a material witness order, repeatedly removed him from custody to curry favor with him and ensure his cooperation, showed him photographs of specific individuals prior to identification procedures and or to trial. Thomas subsequently provided different stories to the grand jury and at trial. Additionally, the judge refused to allow evidence of Thomas's documented psychiatric and substance abuse history at the trial. You got it, Ganja. Thank you so much for your support. Ganja said, I just got my 420 Puff Puff Pass shirt in the mail the other day. Already wore it and it fit just right too. Wop, 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 wop. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Captain, for your support. They are nice t-shirts, though. I mean, if I do say so myself, it's nice quality, isn't it, Ganja? They're nice tees. They also threatened them, showed them photographs of specific individuals prior to ID procedures, and prepared them to provide false IDs, including before the grand jury and at the 1966 trial. Oh, listen to this one. These defendants and others repeatedly met with defendant Ronald Timberlake, who illegally took one of the murder weapons from the crime scene before contacting the FBI. I'm glad you like it, Ganja. Wop, wop, wop. Timberlake was urged by these defendants, whom to identify as the perpetrators in the shooting of X. Timberlake was offered monetary and other benefits in return for his cooperation. They promised to assist him with criminal and civil matters in return for his cooperation and threatened him. Let's see. NYPD defendant Salento, acting individually and in concert with the investigating FBI defendants, met one or more times with witness Earl Grant, whereby he received information, the account of a percipient witness who recognized several persons involved in the murder of X. At the 1966 criminal trial, Grant detailed the delayed response of the officers present and their nonchalance to the severe nature of the moment. Grant stated, quote, I could hardly believe my eyes. Here were New York City policemen entering a room from which at least a dozen shots had been heard, and yet not one of them had his gun out. As a matter of absolute fact, some of them even had their hands in their pockets. This is more evidence that the NYPD knew of the assassination. NYPD defendants communicated the exculpatory information they became aware of during the investigation, who in turn communicated that information to defendants Salento, Gerlich, blah, 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 blah. These are the investigating FBI defendants repeatedly met with witness and Malcolm X's bodyguard, Charles Blackwell. They urged Blackwell on whom to identify as perpetrators in the shooting, threatened him, fed him false facts to recite in testimony, and prepared him to provide false IDs. During the grand jury hearing on March 9, 1965, Blackwell identified 3 men as the individuals who shot and killed X. However, during his testimony at the 1966 trial, he only identified 1 individual. That's awesome, Ganja. I didn't know you bought all that. That's so nice. Thank you. I'm glad that I'm present in your home. That's neat. During the grand jury hearing, Blackwell identified 3 men. However, in the 66 trial, he only identified one. When asked about the discrepancies, Blackwell stated that he lied in front of the grand jury because he was ashamed that he left his post on the day of the assassination. NYPD files unearthed in the DANY investigation and publicly revealed only in November of 2021 included information about a call to a New York Daily News reporter on the morning of the shooting, indicating that Malcolm X was going to be killed. Yet no uniformed officers were present at the event. Right back at you, Ganj. At the 1966 trial, NYPD police officer Gilbert Henry testified on what he observed the day Malcolm X was murdered. Henry stated that he and his partner John Carroll were assigned to be outside the Audubon Ballroom that day. Henry explained the unusual instructions his superior officer, Sergeant Devaney, gave him. They're unisex, Amy. So, like unisex size. I wouldn't say necessarily large, but they're uni. Unless it's otherwise noted, they're uni. And I'm coming out with new sweatshirts for this season. Got some hot pink coming in hot. Sergeant Devaney told Henry and his partner to remain where they would not be seen. If anything occurred, Henry should use the walkie-talkie provided to him. At the other end of the walkie-talkie was another police officer stationed at Presbyterian Medical Center, the same hospital X was taken to after he was shot. After the shooting started, Henry attempted to use the walkie-talkie for backup, but received no response. When Henry arrived at the crime scene, all the suspects were gone. That's not sus. The FBI, NYPD, and Boise defendants made sure that police officers were nearby but not present in the Audubon Ballroom to ensure that they did not impede the murderers from slaying Malcolm X. Let's see how many pages we have left. $100 million, y'all. We're about three quarters. Yeah, we're about three quarters of the way there. Okay, so defendant Eugene Roberts. On April 17th, 1964, 4 days after Malcolm X left New York for his pilgrimage to Mecca, Boise defendants sent their newly sworn-in 25-year-old black detective, defendant Eugene Gene Roberts, to infiltrate Muslim Mosque, Inc. Roberts joined the MMI security team as one of Malcolm X's bodyguards. Roberts reported all of the MMI and OAAU's major decisions and plans to the NYPD. Defendant Roberts, decades later, recalled that on the evening of Monday, February 15th, 1965, Malcolm X held a speaking engagement at the Audubon Ballroom, the same room he would be assassinated in 6 days later. Defendant Roberts was at the time posing as a security guard for Malcolm X, while secretly working as an undercover officer for the Boise unit of the NYPD. Can you imagine? Man, having an informant on your damn security detail? Defendant Roberts explained that there was a noise in the audience. Then an unknown individual walked down the aisle. Defendant Roberts moved toward the individual, and the individual abruptly sat down. Welcome back, Potato. Defendant Roberts believed he had witnessed a dry run of Malcolm X's assassination and reported this to his department after the meeting. Defendant Roberts' department called his supervisor, Defendant Theologes, the next day and expressed. Roberts felt like it was going to happen at the meeting the following Sunday. Roberts told him if it's going to happen, it's going to go down Sunday. Defendant Roberts then called his other supervisor at a later date and once again explained what he witnessed. However, his defendant supervisor's simple response was, quote, "Okay, we'll pass it on," and, quote, "We'll take care of it." This information was part of the defendant's knowledge that resulted in the arrest members of Malcolm X's security detail. On the evening of February 15th, 65, in his speech before his assassination, X stated, quote, "Don't you think that anything is going to go down that the police don't know about? The only thing that goes down is what they want to go down. And what they don't want to go down, they don't let go down." End quote. Numerous NYPD, Bossy, and FBI informants and undercover officers, almost all whom remain unidentified to this day, witnessed the murder of Malcolm X, including defendant Roberts, who was continuing to pose as a security guard while also continuing his clandestine work as an undercover officer for the NYPD. As a member of the Rostrum security team on the day of Malcolm X's murder, defendant Roberts observed two of the shooters seated in the front row. Now, mind you, his family, X's family, was also in the front row. He saw three shooters run in the same direction towards the back of the Audubon ballroom. Two shooters ran past defendant Roberts, and defendant Roberts physically engaged the third. Defendant Roberts' identity as an undercover NYPD officer and the reflection that he witnessed Malcolm X's murder was not made public until he testified in 1970 in the Black Panther 21 case. I don't even know what that is. When questioned about Malcolm X's murder at the 1970 trial, defendant Roberts testified that he was working undercover as a member of Malcolm's Rostrum security. And at the end of Benjamin Goodman's speech, the Rostrum security was relieved. So he proceeded to the back where he met the security captain, who told them just to sit around, and in an hour and a half, they would be on post again. Defendant Roberts also testified that two individuals near the front of the auditorium jumped up to create the distraction. As defendant Roberts started down the aisle towards them, gunfire erupted. Defendant Roberts testified that he came face to face with Talmadge Hayer, one of Malcolm X's assassins, who shot at him but missed, and that he hit Hayer with a chair, knocking him down. Defendant Roberts reported his observations to the Bossy defendants, but they decided not to reveal the information to anyone outside of their covert unit. Instead, pursuant to the NYPD's policies and established practices at the time, defendant Roberts' identity and the intelligence he generated were strictly compartmentalized, kept secret, even within the NYPD. As a result, neither the prosecution, the court, the defense, nor the public knew that defendant Roberts was a Bossy undercover agent until he was revealed as a witness in 1970. In an interview decades later, defendant Roberts revealed that in the days following the assassination, he was chastised by his Bossy handlers for giving Malcolm X mouth-to-mouth resuscitation after he was shot. This is further evidence that employees of Bossy wanted Malcolm X dead. Defendant John Alley was reportedly a former FBI informant, provocateur, working under defendants Hoover and Sullivan. Alley was National Secretary of the NOI, which he reportedly infiltrated on orders from the FBI without the knowledge and approval of defendants Hoover and Sullivan. Alley and Malcolm X were friends early in their membership in the NOI. They were also roommates for a time. Malcolm X and his wife shared a house with defendant Alley and his wife. Defendant Alley replaced Ernest T. McGee as the National Secretary of the NOI. In terms of hierarchy with the NOI, this made FBI defendant Alley second only to Elijah Muhammad, who was the leader. In this highly influential position, Alley was in charge of the NOI's banking institution and all confidential communications between the NOI Chicago headquarters and other mosques. It passed through Defendant Ali's office first. Defendant Ali also informed Elijah Muhammad directly of Malcolm X's comments regarding JFK's assassination, which caused Malcolm X to be suspended from the NOI. Malcolm X blamed Defendant Ali for his suspension. In July of 65, on a trip to L.A., the L.A. Police Department provided Malcolm X protection when NOI members, including Defendant Ali, awaited Malcolm X's arrival at the airport, even though his trip was supposed to be a secret. Only 7 people were aware of his trip. Sugarfoot. Yes, Judy. Yes, we do. On February 20th, 65, the day before the murder, Defendant Ali was witnessed with hair in the Americana Inns restaurant in New York. Defendant Ali arrived from Chicago on February 1965, checked into a hotel in Manhattan, and checked out on the 21st. The FBI defendants have withheld, and the FBI continues to withhold, Defendant Ali's informant status, and the FBI also continues to this day to suppress the identity of his FBI handlers, his connection to COINTELPRO, and his role in the assassination of Malcolm X and the subsequent cover-up of that role. I will, Darcy, for sure. Defendant Raymond Wood. Significantly, in 2021, the family of bossy defendant Raymond Wood made a public letter he typed before his death. The NYPD hired Defendant Wood on April 17th, 1964, and assigned him to the bossy unit. In the letter, don't you love all these deathbed confessions? Like, what the heck? In the letter, Defendant Wood stated his job was to infiltrate civil rights organizations throughout New York City to find evidence of criminal activity so the FBI could discredit and arrest its leaders. Following the direction of his handlers, he was instructed to encourage leaders and members of civil rights groups to commit felonious acts. At one point, Defendant Wood attempted to resign, but the NYPD threatened trumped-up charges against him. In this letter, Defendant Wood also discussed an alleged plot to blow up the Statue of Liberty. Defendant Wood explained that his bossy supervisors planned to implicate 2 of Malcolm X's bodyguards in the plot. Bossy defendants did this to make sure they were unable to provide security for Malcolm X on the day of his murder. Defendant Wood was sent to the Audubon Ballroom on the day of the assassination. He further stated that he was identified by witnesses leaving the scene and that Thomas Johnson was later arrested and wrongfully convicted to protect Wood's cover and the secrets of the FBI and the NYPD. On March 6, 65, at an OAAU meeting, Japanese-American advocate Yuri Kochiyama, who was present at that meeting, scribbled on a small piece of paper, quote, Ray Woods is said to have been seen also running out of Audubon and was one of 2 picked up by police, was the second person running out. The bossy and FBI defendants concealed Wood's identity as an undercover agent for decades, and Bossy and the FBI continue to this day to suppress the identity of his handlers and his role in the Statue of Liberty frame-up, his role in the assassination of Malcolm X, and the cover-up. Abdul Basit Naim was a journalist residing in New York at all times relevant. Naim was also an FBI informant and member of the NOI, working on Elijah Muhammad's public relations. Naim also traveled abroad with Malcolm X on occasion. However, once Malcolm X left the NOI, Naim's attacks on him began. Naim was reportedly the FBI's, quote, second reliable informant in the NOI's inner circle. He published several anti-Malcolm X articles just before the assassination, including his, quote, hypocrites cannot alter Muhammad's divine destiny. The FBI defendants have withheld and continue to withhold Defendant Naim's informant status And the FBI also continues to this day to suppress the identity of the handlers, connection to COINTELPRO, etc., etc. Other other top level NOI officials also cooperated with the FBI defendants. They provided the FBI with information it considered crucial to inciting violence between Elijah Muhammad, the NOI, and Malcolm X. The FBI has withheld and continues to withhold these officials' identities, the information they supplied, and the actions they took. In or around 2020, FBI former agent defendant Arthur Fulton admitted he was in charge of 9 informants in the Audubon Ballroom when the shooting started. Not one interceded to halt the events that unfolded, and thanks to the concealment by Fulton, his FBI superiors, including Hoover and Sullivan, the identities, activities, and information supplied remain unknown. Subsequent revelations in 77 and 78. Benjamin Goodman, Malcolm X's assistant minister who spoke to the audience in the Audubon Ballroom immediately before Malcolm, submitted an affidavit in 78 supporting the innocence of Mr. Aziz and Mr. Johnson. Goodman discussed in his affidavit how the NYPD, including on information and belief, one or more of the NYPD defendants named herein, summoned him to the police station and questioned him about Mr. Aziz and Mr. Islam. Goodman repeatedly told the officers that the two men were not at the Audubon Ballroom. Goodman stated the detectives became irate because he was not saying what they wanted to hear. Goodman was summoned again at a later date by Assistant District Attorney Herbert J. Stern. Goodman told Stern the following: I knew Butler and Johnson. They had not been present at the Audubon Ballroom that day, and that I had not seen the actual shooting. When I said this, Mr. Stern became angry and said that he knew I previously said that I had seen the shooting through an open dressing room door. This was not true, and I had never said this to anyone. In his anger, Mr. Stern threatened me and asked me, have you ever been to jail? How would you like to go to jail? Goodman was never called to testify in the 1966 murder trial. Robert Higgins was a photographer for Malcolm X. Higgins was present in the ballroom on the day of the assassination. Higgins recounted that he observed over 24 police officers in the waiting room. However, it was not until Malcolm X was shot that they came into the ballroom. Higgins was never called to testify in the murder trial. Talmadge Hayer's affidavits identified his fellow assassins as Benjamin Thomas, Leon Davis, William X., and Wilbur McKinley. Hayer described the murder plot, his recruitment for the plot, the planning of the murder, and each assassin's role. Hayer explained that he and Davis sat in the front row of the Audubon Ballroom with Bradley and Thomas sitting close behind them and McKinley in the rear. In December of 77, Mr. Aziz moved to vacate his conviction for the assassination of Malcolm X, primarily on the grounds of newly discovered evidence. In January of 78, Roberts provided a substantially false affidavit submitted by Danny in the 1977 440 motion, in which he falsely denied his or the NYPD's involvement in the assassination and averring that he did not have any information or reason to believe Mr. Aziz was innocent. Relying on this false affidavit and deprived of crucial evidence that was suppressed by the FBI and NYPD, Justice Harold Rothwax denied Mr. Aziz's 440 motion. So then November 18th, 2021, revelations. We are on page 61. Fuck, there's still a lot. 61 and there's 83 pages. A nearly 2-year investigation by the NYPD Attorney's Office and the Innocence Project uncovered documents that revealed a description of the killers that did not match Mr. Aziz or Mr. Islam, an admission that only witnesses who identified them were FBI informants, and a report that said sources reviewed photos of Mr. Islam and failed to place him in the ballroom Among the documents unearthed in this investigation were 4 FBI reports that summarized interviews with a witness to the murder who had been a federal informant testified at the trial. It did not name the witness. The witness's name continues to be redacted. Other evidence contained in the joint motion corroborated key details of Hayer's testimony in 66 and his affidavits in 77 and 78. Was the crucial initial account of prosecution witnesses Charles Blackwell. This account, which contradicted Blackwell's later trial testimony, was memorialized in an NYPD report, the Blackwell Report, that was uncovered during the conviction integrity reinvestigation, but hidden by the defense, by the NYPD and FBI for more than 55 years. Would you guys mind if we if we took a little break from these? I get a little break from reading. And listen to a little bit of the research that Potato and I have uncovered. I would love to share this with y'all. We can take a little breather and listen to Potato and Jay podcast. This is episode 1. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI. I know y'all want to hear Potato's voice instead of mine. You guys want to hear it? Okay, the topic is in the description and the title of the video. However, we're taking a little breather from the documents about Malcolm X, and we're going to learn a little bit about Hoover's FBI. Thanks, guys. I'm going to go use the facilities, get a drink, and stuff like that. Yes, history lesson. There you go, guys. Thank you for watching. Given the fallout. Maybe I should have prefaced with this, huh? I didn't even think about it. But let's do it.
Welcome, history buffs and conspiracy sleuths, to a journey through the hidden corridors of the past. You've just tuned in to Given the Fallout podcast.
For the United States government to solve the
with your hosts, J and D.
She's 80's tire bag. She's a terrible old bag. Oh, she's an old bitch in my estimation.
Given the Fallout is your passport to the past, where reality often blurs with myth.
Given the fallout.
Given the fallout.
J. Edgar Hoover was born on January 1st, 1895, in Washington, D.C. He came from a middle-class family and showed an early interest in law enforcement. His father, Dickerson Hoover, died in 1921 when J. Edgar was just 26 years old. This loss had a significant impact on Hoover and his family. After his father's death, Hoover became very close to his mother, Annie Marie Sheitlin Hoover.
Mama's boy.
The loss of his father and his close relationship with his mother influenced his upbringing and his career path, leading him to a lifetime of public service. Annie played a significant role in his life, and they maintained a strong mother-son bond throughout his adulthood. His mother was the only person who had permission to access his personal diary. Annie Hoover was a dedicated mother who supported her son's education and career aspirations. She encouraged his pursuit of law enforcement and public service. Hoover lived with his mother until her death in 1938, when Hoover was 43 years old.
Bing bang.
Hoover attended George Washington University, where he studied law and worked part-time at the Library of Congress. During his time there, Hoover worked as a messenger and a clerk. His duties involved tasks such as delivering documents, arranging books, and helping with administrative work. This experience allowed him to develop organizational skills and gain exposure to the workings of a large institution, which likely contributed to his later career in law enforcement and administration. He literally worked his way from the bottom up and took everything he could from each position to better his skills. In 1917, at the age of 22,
Thank
Hoover
you so
joined
much,
the
Bat
Department
Girl.
of Justice, beginning his career as a clerk and then quickly moving up the ranks. He initially worked in various divisions, including the War Emergency Division and the Alien Enemy Bureau, where he focused on issues related to national security and wartime activities during World War I. Hoover's career took a significant turn when he was appointed as Special Assistant to the Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer in 1918, and the following year was made head of the General Intelligence Division, the GID, of the United States Department of Justice. He was in charge of the GID's operations, which focused on monitoring and investigating various radical and subversive groups in the aftermath of World War I. He played a significant role in the Department of Justice's efforts to combat perceived radical threats, particularly during the First Red Scare. The First Red Scare was a period of intense anti-communist hysteria and fear in the United States that occurred after World War I, roughly from 1917 to 1920. There were several key factors that contributed to the First Red Scare. The Russian Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, which led to the establishment of a communist government, sent shockwaves around the world. Many Americans feared that similar revolutions could happen in the United States. There was labor unrest, anti-immigration sentiment, particularly directed at immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe, who were associated with radical political ideologies. There was anti-communist propaganda and fear-mongering in newspapers and from political figures, leading to an overall atmosphere of paranoia. And there were the Palmer raids. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, with the assistance of J. Edgar Hoover, conducted a series of raids and arrests aimed at suspected radicals and anarchists. These raids were known as the Palmer raids and were marked by civil liberties violations. So what triggered these raids? On June 2nd, 1919, there were a series of bombings, including one at the home of Palmer in Washington, D.C. Palmer responded by launching a series of raids aimed at apprehending suspected anarchists and communists. He believed that these groups were plotting to overthrow the US government. Between late 1919 and early 1920, the Palmer raids involved the arrest and detention of thousands of individuals, many of whom were immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe. These raids were often conducted without search warrants or proper legal procedures. Particularly non-citizens who were deemed undesirable or subversive. The most famous case is the deportation of Emma Goldman. She was a Russian-born anarchist, a political activist, and writer, and she played a pivotal role in the development of anarchist political philosophy in North America and Europe at the time. And Alexander Berkman. He was a Russian-American anarchist and author, who were prominent anarchists. The Palmer raids were highly controversial and criticized for their violation of civil liberties. Many believed they were excessive and indiscriminate, leading to the arrest of innocent people. The Red Scare gradually subsided, in part due to the lack of concrete evidence and a widespread conspiracy. Additionally, the public began to view the raids as government overreach and abuse of power. In the end, the Palmer raids failed to uncover a widespread communist conspiracy, and they are often seen as a dark chapter in American history that highlighted the tension between national security concerns and civil liberties during times of perceived crisis. Hoover continued to be involved in anti-radical activities, which included monitoring and investigating individuals and groups believed to be a threat to national security due to their political ideologies. Hoover's dedication and effectiveness in these roles led to his rise within the Justice Department. He gained a reputation for his anti-radical efforts and commitment to national security. In 1924, when the Bureau of Investigation was reorganized and renamed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Attorney General Harlan F. Stone appointed J. Edgar Hoover as the acting director. Later that year, he was officially named the director of the FBI. He was only 29 years old. The primary focus of the FBI in its early years was on criminal investigations. The agency investigated a wide range of federal crimes, including bank robberies, kidnappings, interstate crimes, and crimes involving multiple states. Under Hoover's leadership, the FBI expanded its activities and investigative methods. He focused on modernizing law enforcement, utilizing scientific methods for crime detection, and establishing the FBI as a national law enforcement agency. His vision was to lead all law enforcement into an era of professionalism. He immediately recruited a group of neatly dressed, college-educated agents. These well-educated federal agents went head-to-head in the 30s with bank robber gangs who were using vehicles and machine guns with deadly effect. Hoover's agents, who weren't very streetwise, lost initial encounters with prominent figures at the time: Pretty Boy Floyd, the Dillinger Gang, and Babyface Nelson. Hoover decided his agency had to adapt to overcome. He waived the college education requirement in some cases. He aimed for recruitment of local law enforcement officers with a history of manhunting and winning gunfights, and it worked. Hoover and the FBI were instrumental in pursuing and capturing high-profile criminals. These pursuits and captures were often highly publicized and contributed to the FBI's growing reputation as a federal law enforcement agency capable of taking on organized crime and violent criminals. Hoover single-handedly controlled every aspect of the FBI. He also controlled public perception of the FBI via the media. Hoover was a PR master and knew that if anyone was going to hand over their crime tips, they needed to be able to trust the FBI was the most upstanding and reliable force. Hollywood and the media could not reference the FBI or its agents without passing their portrayal by Hoover. So much so that in 1954, Congress made it illegal for anyone to depict the FBI for commercial purposes without the approval of the director of the FBI, Hoover. During the 1930s and 40s, the FBI intensified its focus on surveillance of suspected subversive groups, communists, and anarchists. This was exacerbated during World War II when the FBI expanded its surveillance efforts to counter espionage and sabotage threats, including monitoring suspected Nazi sympathizers and Japanese spies. Following World War II was the Second Red Scare, a period of intense anti-communist hysteria and fear in the late 40s and 50s. Senator Joseph McCarthy played a prominent role in fueling the Red Scare with his sensational claims of communist infiltration in the US government. He famously waived a list of alleged communists working in the State Department. The FBI provided information and investigations into alleged communist infiltration in the US government. Overlapping the Red Scare from the late 1940s through the 50s and into the 60s was the Lavender Scare. It focused on the fear and persecution of LGBTQ+ individuals, particularly those working in government positions. While J. Edgar Hoover was not the sole figure associated with the Lavender Scare, his FBI played a significant role in identifying and purging LGBTQ+ employees from government jobs. So what was the fear around LGBTQ+? The perception that LGBTQ+ individuals were susceptible to communism during the Red Scare and Lavender Scare eras was rooted in several misguided stereotypes, misconceptions, and prejudices. These perceptions were not based on actual evidence, but were driven by fear, prejudice, and political agendas. There was social stigma to being gay. Being openly LGBTQ+ was taboo, and many people lived in the shadows due to societal discrimination, which made them vulnerable to accusations and blackmail, which could be exploited by those looking to identify alleged security risks. Some officials believed that they could be easily blackmailed by foreign agents or communist sympathizers. The idea was that if someone's sexual orientation was hidden or considered shameful at the time, they might be more likely to cooperate with foreign entities and protect their secrets. LGBTQ+ communities often existed as hidden or underground subcultures, which made them appear mysterious or potentially rebellious to those who did not understand or accept them. This contributed to the belief that they might be involved in activities perceived as un-American. There are also the perception of deviance. Homosexuality was viewed as a form of deviance or moral corruption. This perception led some to believe that LGBTQ+ individuals were more likely to engage in subversive or anti-establishment activities, including communism. The government's aggressive pursuit of communist sympathizers led to guilt by association. They themselves could come under scrutiny, leading to a broader perception of LGBTQ+ individuals as potential threats. The Lavender Scare resulted in the firing of many LGBTQ government employees and created a hostile environment that forced many others to conceal their sexual orientation. It also affected heterosexual individuals who were single, those living alone who were assumed to be hiding their sexuality. It had a bigger impact on people than the Red Scare, but is less known. One such person who was discharged from the Air Force in 1955 was Helen James. Helen James enlisted in 1952 and had an excellent service record. She was promoted to Airman Second Class. But when she was stationed at Roslyn Air Force Base on Long Island, New York, she came under scrutiny by the Office of Special Investigation. One night in 1955, she was sat with a friend in a car eating sandwiches when an officer shone his torchlight into her eyes and took her into custody. She was interrogated for hours. Investigators told Helen that if she didn't sign a statement they put in front of her, they would tell her family she was gay. She signed, and she was discharged as undesirable. Serving personnel were ordered to inform those they served that if they suspected a fellow service member to be gay, they should inform them. It's estimated around 2,000 to 5,000 people who may have been gay were dismissed from the military during that time. Like Helen, they received no severance pay or veterans' health care coverage. She fought for 30 years to have her discharge upgraded, to be recognized as a full serving person in the military, to have her achievements recognized. And in 2018, at the age of 90, she finally had her upgrade to honorable discharge. There have been various speculations and rumors about J. Edgar Hoover's personal life and the nature of his relationships. Over the years, several individuals have been suggested as potential romantic interests or companions, but it's important to note that these claims lack substantial evidence and often rely on anecdotal accounts and hearsay. Some of the individuals whom people have speculated Hoover may have had a relationship with include Clyde Tolson. Clyde Tolson was Hoover's close associate and the associate director of the FBI. Their close friendship and subsequent social interactions led to persistent rumors about their relationship. While there has been speculation about a romantic connection, the exact nature of their relationship remains a subject of debate. Hoover and Tolson had a close and enduring friendship that lasted for decades. They worked closely together at the FBI, often spending long hours together at the office, traveling together, and even vacationing together. They were frequently seen together in social settings such as dinners and events, often without their respective families. Their closeness in public raised eyebrows and led to speculation. Hoover and Tolson lived near each other in Washington, D.C., and shared adjoining hotel rooms when they traveled, even though they could have afforded separate accommodations. Some have interpreted this as a sign of a deeper relationship. Some personal letters between Hoover and Tolson contain affectionate language and expressions of deep devotion. These letters have fueled speculation about the nature of their bond. Neither Hoover or Tolson were ever married, which was relatively uncommon for men of their era. Their single status added to the intrigue. While the FBI was deeply involved in counterintelligence and anti-communist efforts, it also played a role in monitoring and investigating civil rights activists and organizations, which leads us into a pivotal point in history, the 1960s.
All right, folks. Today we're diving into a slice of American history that's juicier than your grandma's apple pie. J. Edgar Hoover and the civil rights scandals of the 60s. Hoover wasn't just any FBI director. He was like the godfather of law enforcement, running the show for nearly 50 years. Turns out, he had some skeletons in his closet. Let's unpack this story, shall we?
The Hoover Show.
Hoover was like the rock star of the FBI. He had the looks, well, kind of, the suits, and the power. But when the civil rights movement heated up in the 60s, things got messy. Hoover saw it as a threat to good old American order.
COINTELPRO, the secretive scheme.
The FBI had this super secret program called COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program. It started in the late 50s, and it wasn't about intelligence in the way you might think. Instead, it was about infiltrating, messing up, and even destroying political groups that the government saw as troublemakers. At first, it was all about the communists, but then they set their sights on civil rights activists. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an iconic leader in the civil rights movement, was a prime target of COINTELPRO's covert activities. The FBI spared no effort in its surveillance of Dr. King, wiretapping his phones, placing bugs in his hotel rooms, and scrutinizing his every move. Agents compiled extensive files filled with personal and potentially damaging information in an attempt to discredit him. Beyond surveillance, the FBI launched psychological warfare campaigns against Dr. King. Anonymous letters were sent, threatening to expose extramarital affairs and encouraging him to take his own life. The infamous suicide letter stands as a haunting example of the psychological torment inflicted on this civil rights icon. Fred Hampton, a charismatic leader of the Black Panther Party's Illinois chapter, was another victim of the FBI's COINTELPRO. The Black Panthers, with their calls for self-defense and social reform, were perceived as a significant threat by the FBI.
Dr. King, the thorn in Hoover's side.
Martin Luther King Jr., a smooth-talking preacher with a dream, became Hoover's arch-nemesis. King was all about peaceful protests and equality, but Hoover thought he was stirring up trouble. So what did Hoover do? He wiretapped King's phones and dug for dirt. That's right, the FBI, the ones supposed to protect us, were spying on a national hero.
The Reverend Martin Luther King is on Bimini, writing his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. From his island vacation retreat, King sent FBI Director Hoover a cable suggesting a personal get-together. King responded to Hoover's charge that the civil rights leader was the most notorious liar in the country.
Well, naturally, I was shocked and greatly surprised that Mr. Hoover would make such an unwarranted and vicious accusation. I don't think Mr. Hoover would have made such a statement if he had not been under a great deal of pressure. Probably he is beginning to falter under the awesome responsibilities, complexities, and burdens of his very difficult position, and for this reason, I would not like to get in a public debate with him. I've not done it in the past. My criticisms have always been of the FBI in general.
Do you believe the FBI is doing all it can to resolve civil rights complaints?
Well, I don't know all of the inner workings of the FBI. I do know that in cases that do not involve Negroes and civil rights, the FBI moves with dispatch. It has the machinery, the know-how to find bombings, for instance, of airplanes where you have the wreckage spread over 2 or 3 states. And the fact remains that in spite of all of the brutalities that we faced in Albany, Georgia, not a single arrest was made. In spite of the fact that 4 unoffending innocent Negro girls were brutally murdered in a church in Birmingham, Alabama, not a single arrest has been made. And in spite of the fact that the civil rights workers were killed this summer in Mississippi, we haven't seen a single arrest.
The FBI sent anonymous letters to Martin Luther King Jr., often containing derogatory and threatening language. These letters were intended to intimidate and undermine his resolve.
And you know, there are some Negroes who are ashamed of themselves, but don't be ashamed of your color. Don't be ashamed of your biological features. Somehow you must be able to say in your own lives and really believe it, I am black but beautiful.
And here is an example of one of those letters. King, in view of your low-grade, abnormal, personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor. And your last name calls to mind only the type of king, such as King Henry VIII and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. White people in this country have had enough frauds of their own, but I am sure they don't have one at this time that is anywhere near your equal. You are no clergyman, and you know it. I repeat, you are a colossal fraud, and an evil, vicious one at that. You could not believe in God and act as you do. Clearly, you don't believe in any personal moral principles. King, like all frauds, your end is approaching. You could have been our greatest leader. You, even at an early age, have turned out to not be a leader, but a dissolute, abnormal, moral imbecile. We will now have to depend on our older leaders, like Wilkins, a man of character, and thank God we have others like him. But you are done. Your honorary degrees, your Nobel Prize, what a grim farce. And other awards will not save you. King, I repeat, you are done. No person can overcome facts, not even a fraud like yourself. Lend your sexually psychotic ear to the enclosure. You will find yourself in all your dirt, filth, evil, and moronic talk exposed on the record for all time. I repeat, no person can argue successfully against facts. You are finished. You will find on the record for all time your filthy, dirty, evil companions, male and females, giving expression with you to your hideous abnormalities. And some of them to pretend to be ministers of the gospel. Satan could not do more. What incredible evilness. It is all there on the record, your sexual orgies. Listen to yourself, you filthy abnormal animal. You are on the record. You've been on the record. All your adulterous acts, your sexual orgies extending far into the past. This one is but a tiny sample. You will understand this. Yes, from your various evil playmates on the East Coast to blank and others on the West Coast and outside the country, you are on the record. King, you are done. The American public, the church organizations that have been helping, Protestant, Catholic, and Jews, will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. So will others who have backed you. You are done. King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has definite, practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination took place at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. King, who was in the city to support striking sanitation workers, was standing on the motel's second-floor balcony when he was shot. The assassin, James Earl Ray, fired a single shot from a nearby rooming house. The bullet struck King in the lower jaw and traveled through his neck, severing his spinal cord. Despite immediate efforts to save his life, Dr. King was pronounced dead at St. Joseph's Hospital. So freaking sad. This is J2.
We heard what sounded just like a firecracker, a loud, real loud shot.
I said, Dr. King, that was it. And the bullet exploded in his face.
And he had fallen backwards. And I heard somebody holler, "Oh, Lord."
The bullet knocked him up off of his feet in that direction against that ledger over there.
Did Dr. King say anything?
He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything at all.
It's a hectic scene tonight. A bullet struck Dr. King in the back of the neck. He was rushed to St. Joseph Hospital in critical condition.
Dr. Martin Luther King was received in the emergency room at St. Joseph Hospital at approximately 6:15 p.m.
Well, I just was told that he had been shot. The report I got was in the shoulder. It was serious. That was the report I got from Reverend Andrew Young.
He is in the emergency room and he is in critical condition.
And there was 20 or 30 doctors, and they tried external heart massage, and his respiration muscles were paralyzed and everything else was paralyzed, and he would have lost all of his sensations. He still didn't have any blood.
You understand, really a massive wound.
I've never seen a wound like this.
James Earl Ray, the man responsible for the assassination, went on the run immediately after the shooting. A massive manhunt was launched to capture him. Ray was eventually arrested 2 months later in London, England, and was extradited to the United States to face trial. In a surprising turn of events, he pled guilty to the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. on March 10, 1969, and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. The FBI, America's top law enforcement agency, played a significant role in the investigation following King's assassination. Their involvement included assisting local law enforcement in the manhunt for James Earl Ray and providing forensic analysis of the murder weapon. However, it's the FBI's actions prior to the assassination that have raised the most controversy. During the Civil Rights Movement, the FBI, under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover, conducted extensive surveillance on Martin Luther King Jr. and his associates. They wiretapped King's phone lines, monitored his movements, and even sought to discredit him by gathering information about his personal life, including alleged extramarital affairs. Anonymous letters were sent to King and his wife, Coretta Scott King, in an attempt to disrupt their marriage and reputation. These actions were part of a broader government effort to suppress civil rights activism during the 60s. Hoover viewed King's civil rights movement as radical and potentially threatening to the status quo. The controversies surrounding the FBI's involvement in MLK's life and the events leading up to his assassination have led to numerous conspiracy theories. Some have alleged that the FBI may have had a role in the assassination itself, or at the very least, failed to prevent it due to their surveillance of King. Official investigations have not found concrete evidence to support these claims, We're but about they persist as part of the historical debate. This is not. In conclusion, Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination was a tragic moment in American history, marking the end of a remarkable civil rights leader's life. While James Earl Ray was convicted of the murder, and the FBI's role in the assassination remains a topic of controversy, it is essential to remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of promoting civil rights and social justice, which continues to inspire generations of activists to this day. Thank you for listening to that, guys. I love that some people were not aware of some of this information that we uncovered here. I'm really, really glad. I mean, if there's 65 people that heard something they didn't know, that's pretty amazing, right? I know Gary just came in and he remembers all of this stuff, going down. He was alive. I know a lot of younger people are like, doesn't pertain to me. But, does it ever? Does this ever pertain to us all, right? So let's get back to our documents so we can finish out this very important lawsuit. I mean, I find this to be absolutely fascinating that it's being called out. I absolutely love it. I love it. Love it, love it. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you, Jammers.
Shall we play a game?
Okay, so we left off. Well, we kind of took a break, so that was kind of our intermission. We've read through half of the 85-page documents. Your husband's a big history buff. I mean, I learned things doing research just for that one episode that I never knew. And, I was flabbergasted by the things that I was learning. And this all started, believe it or not, our dive into history. What was it, like a year ago, I think, now that we did that episode. Not only is it a year later and we have this being actually called out in an actual court document, but I learned so much that I was taken aback when we covered Charles Manson. And we looked into MK Ultra. And when we started looking into MK Ultra and realized that it was actually real, that was where this led to. And then from there, we learned about what they call that, where they had hookers bring the men to the room, and then they fed the men spiked with psychedelics. What was that called? It was like Project something, or At Night, not At Night. There probably was At Night. Not At Night, but I don't know, it was something weird. But it involved hookers and the Johns they brought back. They were spiking their drinks with LSD, and then these sick perverts in the CIA and the FBI would observe the sex and observe how the men behaved under the psychedelics. I mean, if you think that our government isn't sick in the head, that is some sick ass ish. What's the point of that? What's the end goal of observing men who wanted a hooker, screw them while they're on LSD? I know someone will spit it out. It's called, damn it. Y'all gonna make me Google it? No, it's not Mockingbird. Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax. Thank you, Potato. Operation Midnight Climax. Google it. The shit really happened. Can you imagine paid FBI agents being paid to sit there and watch people have sex? They were trying to figure out how to manipulate the enemy. So they gave people LSD under all these different circumstances, and that was one of them. Because they were wanting, or probably using, LSD in the war. The very first freak-offs, for real, though. Under the guise of, what is it? Research, if you will. We were shocked by this, and that was what made us continue on, and want to learn more. Like, what else do we not know? Midnight Climax. Yeah. What a name, too. It's like they weren't even trying to hide it. Here we go. It's right on the CIA's website. Here, look at this. Screw it. Let's look at this. Hold on. Check it. This was released in 2004. This document, okay? It says Channel 2. KTVU 11 p.m. News, Oakland. Newsman. The director of Central Intelligence appeared today in San Francisco, and he asked the city's forgiveness for that spy agency's operation of a bawdy house at 225C Chestnut Street during the mid-50s. Turner said that Operation Midnight Climax, wherein unsuspecting citizens were lured to this Telegraph Hill apartment where the CIA's drug experiments were, in his words, abhorrent. But the CIA chief said he didn't know much about the operation since he hadn't spoken with the mastermind. Turner, the CIA is not involved in investigating Americans, and we also did not want to appear to be influencing Gottlieb in any way to testify or not testify. I have not communicated him since these new documents became available. Newsman. Admiral Turner said there was no such operations now. He did emphasize, however, the CIA continues to be deeply interested in the international drug trade. But the CIA's mind control experiments, he said, are all past history. And it goes on. Today in Washington, 4 men who used to work for the CIA on Operation Midnight Climax, the Senate Intelligence Committees issues subpoenas to bring them into the hearings room next month. Look, CIA chief deplores CIA brothels. I mean, there's news articles on this shit. CIA vows new course. So there's your proof that this Operation Climax actually existed. We went in on the deep dive. Yeah. Sometimes we do that, Gary. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay. So we left off back to Malcolm X. Let's switch our gears back to the rest of this. Can the people who were watched sue? Yeah. Who knows, Meg? Who knows? I mean, it's been since the 50s. Are they even alive? You know what I mean? At this point, those people are probably all past. Probably sin. Bunch of perverts, man. Bunch of damn perverts. This shit ain't no new news that there's perverts within authority and power. So we were on Charles Blackwell and the men that were accused of killing Malcolm X, right? And the NYPD and the defendants suppressing the information. So let's move on. Okay, so here are a few of the facts that were okay. So this is what was uncovered in the newly released documents. Oh, they promised the women to have protection from law enforcement. Wow. Okay, so among the crucial newly discovered documents unearthed and reinvestigation made public on or after November 18th, 2021 include, but are not limited to, so this is new evidence that we're on. An FBI report dated February 22nd, 1965 states that the killers of Malcolm X were possibly imported to New York City, and the shooters sat in the front seats of the Audubon Ballroom and provided detailed descriptions of two suspects. An FBI report dated February 25th, 1965, that said then Director J. Edgar Hoover's behest, local FBI offices were instructed not to disclose to the NYPD the FBI informant status of any witness in the murder investigation. Another FBI report on March 4th of that year, containing information about a known associate of Halem's nicknamed Turk, was believed to be Leon Davis, the man now known to have shot Malcolm X with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The conduct attributed to Mr. Aziz in the criminal case. So Mr. Aziz was the one that was wrongly convicted. A police report dated March 8th, 65, with information from an eyewitness describing the shooters as men from the Nation of Islam and based in New Jersey who sat in the front row on the left-hand side, with Benjamin from Patterson or Newark seated 2 rows behind them. FBI report summarizing intelligence that one of the shooters came from Newark, New Jersey. The shotgun-wielding assassin, William Bradley, contained detailed information collected between 63 and 65, demonstrating links between him and the murder. A memorandum from Defendant Hoover to the special agent in charge of the New York field office, instructing that the FBI's intelligence implicating a lieutenant from the Newark Temple of the Nation of Islam, referring to Bradley, must, quote, not be furnished to the NYPD without first receiving bureau authority. Numerous reports from bossy defendant Eugene Roberts corroborating Hayer's account of the murder and undermining every prosecution witness testimony. The FBI and NYPD defendants hid more information about the assassins of Malcolm X. For example, the FBI had, within a day of the murder, a detailed description of the shotgun assailant, who was described as a Negro male, age 28. They had an exact age. 6'2", 200 pounds, heavy build, dark complexion, wearing a gray coat, and believed to be the assailant who used the shotgun. This description accurately described William Bradley, the same Boston-based informant who provided intelligence about the assailant's connections in New Jersey, also reported to the FBI that the shotgun assailant was a tall, dark-skinned black man recognized as a lieutenant in the Newark Temple, who shot from the hip. Numerous FBI employees, including the FBI defendants, were aware of the match between these descriptions and Bradley. FBI defendant Dale Sutton had prepared the FBI file on Bradley, which described him as a black man, 27 at the time of the murder, 5'10", 197 pounds, stocky, with a dark brown complexion. It also stated that he had been a lieutenant in the Newark Mosque. He was a known strong-arm man for the NOI. He had a history of violence, and he was a former Marine. The file also noted that the FBI possessed photographs of Bradley. The newly revealed evidence also demonstrates a significant ongoing relationship between Bradley and the FBI, including the 4 years after the murder of Malcolm X. Bradley was arrested for participating in an armed robbery in Livingston, New Jersey. Bradley was armed with a shotgun. Bradley and a co-defendant were charged in the U.S. District Court for the District of New Jersey in a case prosecuted by the Department of Justice. When Bradley appeared in court for his plea hearing, he passed a note to the judge, who then reduced his bail from $25,000 to $10,000. Bradley posted bail and was released from custody with no restrictions. Jesus, that scared me. She's so annoying. You were 4 and a total brat and 64. Why do I believe that, Flo? Bradley's co-defendant went to trial, was convicted, and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The DOJ moved to dismiss the charges against Bradley, and the court granted it. Former Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance moved to vacate Mr. Aziz and Mr. Islam's convictions in 2021. So they were convicted. They spent all this time in prison. And then they vacated in 2021. Finally said, oh, it wasn't you. Vance also criticized how law enforcement handled the case, stating that through the investigation, did that scare y'all too? Most critically, we have obtained dozens and dozens of reports from the FBI and the NYPD's Bureau of Special Investigations, BOSSI. And significantly, we now have reports revealing that on orders from J. Edgar Hoover himself, the FBI ordered multiple witnesses not to tell police or prosecutors that they were, in fact, FBI informants. Shorty, yeah, I can when I'm done with this live. I'll check my email. Sure. Thank you for sending it. Appreciate you. The revelations of Walter Bowe. Walter Bowe was a charter member of the OAAU. He was contacted by an undercover bossy officer. Defendant Wood manipulated Mr. Bowe to appear to be part of a conspiracy to destroy the Statue of Liberty. Mr. Bowe was detained and arrested by the NYPD related to the conspiracy manufactured by Wood. Due to his arrest and detainment, Mr. Bowe was not present at the Audubon Ballroom and could not provide security. So Khalil Syed was affiliated with the OAAU in 64-65. On January 24th, 2024, Mr. Syed revealed for the first time in a sworn affidavit, this is just this year. So now, we started out in fucking 1950. Now we are in 2024. He revealed for the first time in a sworn affidavit that he was introduced to defendant Raymond Wood on or about January of 65. Unbeknownst to Mr. Syed, Wood was an undercover bossy officer. Wood raised the idea of destroying the Statue of Liberty. When Wood mentioned this idea, everyone laughed, and Mr. Syed did not think Wood was serious. Mr. Syed was part of a small group of people who were asked to serve as security at X's home after it was firebombed on Valentine's Day, 1965. On or about February 16th, 1965, Mr. Syed was arrested and detained by NYPD related to the conspiracy to blow up the Statue of Liberty that was manufactured by defendant Wood, who was an informant. He had not been arrested. He would have attended the speech, and he would have been part of the security. Okay, the revelations of Mustafa Hassan. On June 6th, Legal Extractions. Thank you for joining, Julie McClellan. Good to have you. Welcome to the Clicker Crew. On June 6th, 2023, Mr. Hassan revealed for the first time in a sworn affidavit that on February 21st, 1965, he assisted with the security detail at the Audubon Ballroom when X delivered his speech. After gunshots rang out, Hassan ran from his post at the entrance of the ballroom and witnessed Malcolm X being shot. As Mr. Hassan made his way towards the stage, he saw a man he now knows to be Talmadge Hayer running down the aisle towards the exit with a gun in his hand. Mr. Hassan later saw Hayer outside the ballroom as Hayer was being beaten by Malcolm X's followers and heard police who had suddenly showed up asking, in reference to Hayer, quote, "Is he with us?" While at the same time holding back Malcolm X's followers from beating Hayer. Julie, I want to thank you so much for being here and thank you for watching later. #replay crew. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody that finds this to be meaningful. I really do. I really, really do. Mr. Hassan believed the police were trying to help Hayer escape, so he reached out and grabbed Hayer by his collar to prevent him from escaping. Shortly after X's assassination, the defendants, acting individually and in concert with one another, the investigating FBI defendants and others named here within, repeatedly met with witness Leon Amir, also known as Leon 4X and Leon Phillips Jr., the head of the Boston OAAU. This is a lot. On March 13th, 1965, Amir stated in a speech that he had facts in his possession as to who really killed Malcolm X, and this is probably the last time we'd see him alive. Amir was found dead under mysterious circumstances mere hours later. Wow. The systemic corruption of the NYPD and Bossy. Before at the time of, and after X's assassination, the defendant city's police department was plagued by institutional deficiencies and corruption that the city allowed to fester and worsen until it was a gaping wound visible to even the most apolitical individuals. The city cultivated and permitted employees of the NYPD to violate the constitutional rights of the citizens of the city without disciplinary risk or repercussions. This is all so disgusting. The Knapp Commission to investigate allegations of police corruption and the city's anti-corruption practices, known as Knapp. In 1970, they created the Knapp Commission under Whitman Knapp. Notably, the Knapp Commission found that the organizational fragmentation of the NYPD contributed to this problem of systemic police corruption. It wrote in its report that during the relevant period, a number of administrative defects precluded effective investigations of police corruption in New York City. Referring to a 1967 report, the Knapp Commission noted that the various units charged with searching out misconduct were widely dispersed, poorly coordinated, undermanned, and in many instances so misdirected that they almost totally ineffective in rooting out political policemen. So it was useless. I'm just scrolling to see if any of this is, a lot of this is repetitive. These are the causes of action. And if you guys want to read this, I will put it in Discord and Facebook and all those. This is basically saying that they failed to disclose all of this new information, and they still failed to not disclose it. Then it lists all these defendants again. I think we're about done, pretty much. I mean, pretty much they monitored his life, phone calls, where he went, even if he left the country. Defendants' action prevented plaintiffs from learning of evidence that explained the cause and parties behind Malcolm X's assassination. DANY continued to prosecute the case with false and incomplete information. The evidence that was concealed included wiretaps, identity of informants, all this stuff, infiltration, other counterintelligence against Malcolm X, the identity and activities of Roberts and Wood and Doe's 1 through 50 in planning the assassination. How did they keep all these people quiet? This one's about the NYPD. Basically, they're saying these three agencies conspired with one another for all these years. The Federal Tort Claims Act. This is about the FBI, CIA, and Department of Justice. Fraudulent concealment. This is against all defendants for fraudulently concealing evidence. Can you believe they are okay with just killing people and putting people in prison for life? And we never learn about this in school. Autotype provides emojis. Are you on a iPhone or Droid? So here we are to the damages. As a direct result of the defendant's intentional, bad faith, willful, wanton, no, I'm just kidding, wanton, reckless, unreasonable, and or deliberately indifferent acts and omissions, X was deprived of his federal constitutional rights. Companionship of their father and grandfather, loss of advice, that was all in the beginning. Here we get to the prayer for relief. Plaintiffs respectfully request that this court enter a judgment against the defendants, granting plaintiffs the following relief: an entry of judgment in favor of the plaintiffs on each and every cause of action, compensatory damages to them and against the defendants jointly and severally in excess of $100 million, reasonable costs and expenses, including attorney's fees, pre-judgment and post-judgment interest and recovery of their costs, such other relief as the court deems just and proper. I know, wonton soup. Signed by Benjamin L. Crump, Ben Crump Law, PLLC, in Washington, D.C. We got through it. It was kind of hard to take all in because I don't really know all of these happenings. So a lot of it was like, huh? But I appreciate you guys being here. Oh, Wapton. Right, exactly, Gary. How could you sleep at night? How could you look your kids in the eye? I just straight up killing people for a political agenda. And you know what? They were successful with their redlining, and that's another thing that we should go over sometime is redlining. Because I'm not going to lie, I never learned about redlining in school. Put a 1 if you learned about redlining in history. I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see who knows what it is and who doesn't. Ganja. 1 ton. Thank you. See, I need my legal extraction with Julie in here. My pronunciation's horrid, Julie. I'm definitely not a lawyer. That's cool, Gary. What is redlining? No. No, 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 you guys say. Redlining maps. Redlining maps were created in the 1950s by the federal government to indicate areas where it was considered unsafe to insure mortgages for black people. The Homeowners Loan Corporation, which I'm sure that was all full of a bunch of whiteys, created the first redlining maps, which were color-coded to indicate the risk of lending in different neighborhoods. The Federal Housing Administration and the Veterans Administration later adopted the maps. The maps were used to warn mortgage lenders about neighborhoods with large black populations, which were considered too risky to insure. This effectively isolated black people in areas with lower investment and fewer economic opportunities. If you ever wonder why we have inner cities and the crime that we have in the inner cities, you can thank this. Black people were doomed from the start. Oh, but we let you drink out of the same fountains we drink out of now. You can go in our bathrooms now. But you know what you won't get? You won't get a mortgage. Even if you work. And you work hard. If you live in the red line areas, you couldn't get a mortgage. Sick. So the impact that it had, redlining helped make homeownership more affordable for white people by making it easier for them to apply for mortgages in predominantly white areas. It also created and reinforced segregation in the United States. They do. You're right, Julie. She said redlining is an entire rabbit hole we should discuss. These are topics that need to be addressed. These issues repeat in different ways until corrected. Absolutely. They do. The same shit is still going on. It's just not so blatant. Hello, Miss Rhonda. Look at that. It only took us 3.5 hours to get 112 likes. But, okay, so things changed in 1968 when the Fair Housing Act made it illegal to discriminate in housing based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. But by that time, it was a little too late. It was a little too late because they had already taken these people and separated them. Okay, so let's look at, I'm going to show you Detroit because I know Detroit. I know several of you are from Michigan. Red line map, Detroit. So, let's see. Here we go. Oh, that's not a good one because I can't click on it. Hold up. Okay. Well, let me see if I can zoom in on this so you guys can see it. This shit's super interesting to me. You can't read it. I'm going to have to find better copies. But if you know Detroit, right, over here where this curve is, where all you see all these zip codes, that list is all zip codes. And this is all labeled. And the red areas are the areas like this is Detroit. And the red areas are where it's mostly black. And this map is from 1968. Or no. Oh, it doesn't. I freaking say? I'm just not finding good ones right now. Let's see this one. Interactive. This is New Orleans. I don't know what any of this means. Let's see this one. How redlining produced poverty in Detroit. Okay, so this one you can see it a little more close up. Let me make it bigger for those in the back. I want you guys to see this. I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe something like this actually exists to even look at. How can you do this to people? How can you do this to people? Right? Look at it's even like by road. I mean, back then, now the whole damn city would be red, but you could see the zip codes down here. Hi, UA. Good to see you, hon. Thanks for stopping in. Today's our cozy little small live today. But yeah, you can see. See, there's Canada. The white part of the map where you see the numbers. That's Canada. And then right across the river is Detroit. And this is how, and they actually had a key on the one. This is from 1939. They were using these maps. Wow. So they were already using these maps and before they just used them for mortgages to make it easier for white people to get a mortgage is what they did. This was already in place. They just found a use for it. Huh. Evil. That's all I can say is I don't know how you can look at another person and want to do this to them. It says, hold on, I want to see. In 1932, the Federal Home Loan Bank Act was enacted to stimulate home sales. And a series of so-called residency security maps were used by the Federal Housing Administration. They called them residency security maps in 1932. And the Homeowners Loan Corporation to indicate what areas in the nation were high risk for home loans. These maps were often marked in red according to racial demographics, and Detroit, as well as many other cities throughout the nation, were redlined as the process of systematic denial of services and investments such as home loans, or through the raising prices of households to residents of usually black neighborhoods and communities. This policy was so pervasive that it has lasted in one form or another to today. Without our government's purposeful imposition of racial segregation, the other causes, private prejudice, white flight, real estate steering, bank redlining, income differences, and self-segregation still would have existed, but with far less opportunity for expression, writes this historian. Another form of redlining is the imposition of what experts say are the unlawful foreclosures on Detroit residents. Detroit reportedly has one of the highest rates of property tax foreclosures since the Great Depression. Many of these homes and retail properties have been foreclosed on, then resold to white-owned corporate entities or well-to-do private homeowners. Out of approximately 3,500 sales of Detroit homes in 2014, 462 received mortgages. In 2014, out of 3,500 homes sold in Detroit, 462 got loans. 87% of the sales were made with cash. This effectively marginalizes Black and poor people and is another form of redlining in a city that is at least 80% African American with a poverty rate of 37.9%. So, yeah, it's sick. There's just so much that I never learned about, you know it? And you can look them up for, all these different cities if you want. There's so much to be known out there. Like, look at this, 1940. Detroit redlining map in 1940. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up, you guys. This has been a lot to take in. I appreciate you guys being here for this Monday Live. And I hope you learned something. If you did, please hit that like button. If you didn't and you say, this is really stupid, Jay, what are you talking about this for? Hit that like button. If you think that this live sucked, hit the thumbs down. I don't give a fuck. It's all interaction. But I appreciate you guys. It's wonderful having these conversations about these things. And I'm telling you, 2025 is probably going to be even more reveals. 74% of you here are history buffs. I loved it too. Thank you so much for joining. If you're replaying, thank you so much. Until the next one, you guys stay safe. All that good stuff. This is important stuff, and we will be following it. Because who's going to respond? The Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, NYPD? How are they going to handle this lawsuit? Are they going to settle out of court? What are they going to do? Right? I guess we wait and see. And check out the FBI vault of COINTEL profiles. Yes, Lindsay. You guys should check out the FBI vault. There's a lot of weird stuff on there. Check out the artifacts from J. Edgar Hoover and see what a weirdo he was. Thank you again to Vet Girl for your generous super chat. You guys dance it out. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this live stream or video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on my latest content. Want to take it a step further? Bring it all in. And join our community clickers by becoming a Patreon or a YouTube member. You'll get exclusive access to our Discord server, special channel perks, and much more. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.
Click. It's real easy, man.
I don't give a damn. I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. 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 You wanna be with me. You wanna feel something real, but I'm feeling differently. You're making plans to get to friends, but don't wanna face the fact that I ain't got time for that. Staying up late, sleeping all day, dreaming about Cadillacs. Buying new shoes, hanging by the pool, sipping on Coke and Jack. Calling my phone when you feel alone, but I'll never call you back. your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. I don't give a
fuzzy slippers and lip gloss.
I don't give a damn. You're mad at me for not giving you comfort. You say that I'm away so much and now you don't feel the way you felt when we were younger. But that's okay for me, 'cause I don't give a damn. I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. 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 I don't give a damn.
You guys want one Jennifer or two Jennifers?
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Bye, Jennifer.